Well, good morning. Director Apollo, it's good to have you here this morning.
Thank you as always for having me.
I've got all my folders here. I see that we have Joel online. Joel, good to see you, and Flavia, both board members. Matt, is the treasurer planning on attending? He's in way. Oh, here he is. Here he is. And there, good treasurer. Commissioner Pope is here. Commissioner Wallace is here. So I think we have a quorum and we can proceed.
Excellent. Would you like to do a formal roll call?
I think we're good.
In that case, it sounds like we want to start rocking and rolling. So in that capacity, if you turn to your agenda after we've opened up and hit quorum, we will approve today's agenda. On the docket for discussion is minute meetings from both the September 7th meeting we had out in Laramie, as well as our special meeting held on October 4th. After that, we have an agency update from my side. I've been here for about a month now, so we'll give you an update on the activity there. We'll go through the expenses of the agency to date and hopefully approve some of those reimbursements, as well as review what I have on the agenda called a budget policy, but we'll go a little bit more into the weeds on what that is when we get there and go a little bit broader in scope. We'll talk through the current structure of the subcommittees and how we're looking to change a little bit of the design there, and also update the code of conduct, which we had tabled during the last discussion. Commissioner Naves will walk us through the request for proposals that she's been working on, particularly a template that could be cascaded to any of the vendors we would look to bring on. Commissioner Reville will go through the updates to Business Plan V3, and we'll start the discussion around selection of our first and initial blockchain to launch on, followed by a high-level outline of the Executive Director report, which is due from my end to the legislature on November 1st, followed by public comment. So with that, I think we would turn to the monthly meeting minutes from September 7th. And I am happy to provide a high-level overview of that discussion.
Is there a request for that? Please, Commissioner.
I was just going to move to approve the minutes as presented.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And that's Commissioner Revelle said aye too, so there we are. Passes.
Right, and if that's for September 7th, we'll move right along to our meeting minutes from October 4th, our special meeting. You have those in your packet as well. Again, happy to provide an overview of that discussion from the 10,000-foot level. If you'd like to simply approve those, I'll leave you to it.
So moved.
So it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Wallace. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Excellent.
Thank you.
We'll keep moving right along.
Yeah.
So in terms of the agency update, so I've been on board for about a month now. That is the onboarding of the executive director. Again, it's been a pleasure to work with everybody, and I'd like to take a quick opportunity to thank all of the different departments who've helped out the Stable Token Agency. Obviously, I'm a bit new to government, so having the support of ANI, ETS, and the Office of the Governor as well has been incredibly helpful in terms of getting me, having my feet under me, making sure that I'm keeping everything above board as we go through the day-to-day processes here. So thank you to everyone who's lent a hand along the way.
Yes.
Second.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Treasurer.
just briefly going back to those minutes, there was maybe a correction that I'd like to put in there. It was in that area as far as disclosure on Lisa Jordy Spillman, that it said that I disclosed that there was a prior relationship, but I believe I also said that we have a current relationship as well, but neither one of those would, interfere with me rendering I guess, a decision. So just wanted to clear that up, because someone may come back and says, well, she's still working for you, Kurt, so why didn't you say so? So I do recall saying that, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman, would I move to reopen the discussion on the
minutes from October 4th?
We could do that. I mean, we are not necessarily bound by the stricture exactly of Robert's rules, but let's do that. That'll be fine.
Okay, so moved.
Okay?
Yes, I would second.
That's a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess what I would ask is that we amend that to say that we had a prior working relationship and we have a current working relationship, but neither would interfere with his ability to objectively render an unbiased decision. So,
Very good.
Got that down as page 3. This is the 4th paragraph. Commissioner Meyer disclosed that in his current role as treasurer, he worked with Lisa Spillman, now of Surmington Law, as she rendered legal services to the treasurer's office. Commissioner Meyer stated that he also has a current working relationship with Lisa Spillman, and that this prior relationship nor his current relationship would interfere with his ability to objectively render an unbiased decision on this matter.
Very good. Does that sit with everybody? Correction is made?
yeah, thank you.
All right. And welcome a motion to accept the amended minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Very good. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So back to the agency update, item B, website migration. To date, the offices of the governor, the treasurer, and the auditor have all been hosting content for the Stable Token Commission, which has been very appreciated. However, at this juncture, we now have our own website available and operational at stabletoken.wyo.gov. I will make a quick note that at current time, because we are using a platform called Notion to host that website, that URL does redirect to stabletoken.notion.site. However, we do have a support ticket open with that team to make sure we are redirecting to a .gov URL, so we have that prestige there. I'll also note that the governor's website has pointed their links to the Stable Token effort to the correct website, as has the auditor's office. Mr. Treasurer, I've been in contact with your office as well. They will be working on that next week once the IT representative in your office is back in pocket.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of the website, I would quickly like to just show everyone what that looks like and some of the capabilities of it. And this will have a bit of an impact later because I do intend for us to use this platform for collaborative purposes. You might just give me a second to get this on the Zoom because my computer has shut down again as we were speaking. So just bear with me for a second. And Brian, I might need your assistance just making sure I have the ability to share what's on my screen.
Okay. Sure. Wow. Yeah.
We are in the Zoom. I am simply waiting for to be escalated to a panelist, which have now been elevated. Thank you, Brian. Excellent. So I simply want to just do a little bit of a tour of what we have on Notion to, again, display some of the collaborative capabilities we can have in the future, because I do think when we start talking about subcommittees, we're going to get into that kind of conversation. So this is the trick. Okay, so this is, if you are on stabletoken.wyo.gov, you'll see a page that looks similar to this. You'll see all of our kind of critical information is now here, things about different meetings, links. We have the same information we had on the governor's website and auditors and treasurer's websites as well. And we've also consolidated all of the prior meeting material. So everything that we've had to date is now organized by meeting. That will typically include a public notice for the meeting, the agenda, the minutes, and any additional materials that were presented, as well as the recording of the meeting, both in terms of its hosting on Google Drive and a live feed of it. And of course, you can see that we've got all the materials from today's discussion as well. And then further, we do have additional resources, we have public comment, and then we have a bucket for additional content. So if you're looking at this on your computer, you probably won't see what's on the left side here, which is stuff that I've been working on kind of behind the scenes. But to show you how easy it is to kind of get some of this content out there, for example, all I need to do is drag one of these different pieces into the public folder, put it under WYO stable token, and next thing you know, we should have, if I was to refresh the page, a way to add content rapidly to this page. And once that happens, put in the right spot. Once that happens, this is how I expect we'll start collaborating on the different subcommittees and the different working groups by having essentially different docs in here that people will be able to comment on or edit based on the permissions that we give them. So this is just a page for myself, and I've also gone ahead and made an example page of naming the token. I could drag that into the public folder as well. And if anyone who's on the website wants to go and put some comments in there about what they want the token to be named, I want to kind of just a little bit of a test for anyone in the audience, have at it. So that will be where things go from here in terms of the website. Any questions on that?
Are there, yeah, please, Mr. Wallace.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious, do you have to like set up a login to make comments on this, or is that just anybody can go in and do that?
It should be through email. So, I'm sorry, through the chair.
Yep.
Should be through email. And what we could do is we can start onboarding people and inviting them following their completion of the code of conduct that we were talking about a little bit later this morning. So that'll be kind of the process flow there.
Very good. Further questions, further comments? No, Anthony, it looks good. I fooled around on it for a little while. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think next up, if we're going to keep moving along here, I'll invite Devin Kenny to the dais with me to talk about the onboarding of external counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Kevin. Kenny.
Chairman, Commissioners, I think I'll keep it relatively brief unless there are lots of questions. So since the last two meetings, since there was a directive to go out and do the RFP process for the external counsel, that was completed. Then at the last special meeting, one of the firms was selected. Since that time, in the, I don't know, was it a week or two? Yep, about 2 weeks. Since then, we have worked on negotiating the contract. I think we are almost there. We took, they had a draft letter that they use is their contract. We put it on our state template, changed some of the terms. They were mostly agreeable to those. I had some additional things which we didn't have any issues with, but at this point, it's just been back and forth with some ticky-tacky grammatical type things. So I would expect they will likely approve the most recent draft when it gets back to them. If they don't, then maybe it'll take a couple more days, but it most likely would get that done here in a day or two, that they will agree. Then we'll get it approved as to form to the Attorney General's office. The parties will sign. Director Apollo will sign, they will sign, and then we can get them formally on board. We have had other meetings with them since then to just kind of discuss some of the processes. Nothing, but of course, like I said, since they haven't signed the agreement, nothing formal has begun, but that I think is where we are. Once they do get on board, we will have more formal meetings, and if we need to have them with certain subcommittees, or I wouldn't necessarily, I would expect that they would attend the subcommittee meetings, but to the extent that if we have subcommittees that have not yet signed the code of conduct, I would not expect they would be speaking at those. because we have attorney-client privilege with them. But if somebody hasn't signed the code of conduct, there is no privilege if they were to speak in those meetings. But we would have them attend at least so they could hear what was going on and what was discussed to the extent that was relevant for the work they're doing. And I think that's about what I would have to present, but I can answer any questions.
Questions? Questions?
Yeah, I think we discussed the code of conduct, but we came to the final language on it, and
Chairman, Commissioner, Treasurer, Director Apollo will be presenting on that in a minute. I mean, if he wants to address it now, he certainly can, but just only point that it's relevant to the extent for them, again, it's because they are attorneys and they are signing an agreement. They're not legal representatives of the state in the sense that the Attorney General's office is. But there is that attorney-client privilege. And if there's, technically those subcommittee meetings are public and there's no kind of privilege or confidentiality with the subcommittees. So if they were to speak and provide any kind of advice or feedback or legal thoughts, they would be waiving the privilege in effect. And they, of course, don't have authority to do that. It's the client that has authority to do that. And the client is the commission, which is not the subcommittee. So until such time as we have those signed, we would instruct them not to speak, although we would still have them attend. But for the actual agenda item of the code of conduct policy, I would leave that to Director Apollo to address.
And I think, Mr. Treasurer, we're about to kind of walk into that and maybe a bit of restructuring on conducting affairs too. So, Mr. Kenny, thank you. Further questions? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Moving along to our next item on the agenda, that would be the budget. So this would be a review of the expenses and spend to date, hopefully approving the reimbursements that we have, and then a discussion of, again, what I've referred to here is the budget policy, but we'll get there in a second. So if you have the paperwork in front of you, there'll be a long 8.5 by 14 with expenses for approval as of October 19th at the top. These are all the expenses the commission has incurred to date, with it broken out by resource as well as the forms that are required by the A&I accounting team, also known as the Wolf's forms. So for me, there's essentially 2 different travel events, as well as a background check and some hardware and software getting set up for a total of $1,760.29. Commissioner Naves also has some travel that we are reimbursing. Net, that nets out to $1,725.43. I will also quickly add that that includes airfare and a car rental for her prospective trip in November for our next meeting of the commission, as well as the November 20th meeting of the select committee. If you flip the page over, there are a couple of additional charges to be reimbursed to the Office of the Governor, particularly the motor pool, for travel back and forth to Laramie for several of our preceding meetings, as well as some name badges for myself, and business cards will be in there shortly. And then there's also several direct payments that need to be made to DCI for the fingerprinting and background checks to the extent of $15 a piece for 3 people so far, and I expect my name as well as Commissioner Reville's will be on there shortly in the next version of this. But for now, all said and done, we've spent under $4,000 for the commission. This goes all the way back to June. The net total here is $3,737.22. To the extent that these expenses need to be reimbursed for both myself and Commissioner Naves, you'll have several other pieces of paper in front of you, which are Form 102, which is the payment voucher, and Form 104, which is the travel voucher, which maps this all out. And I want to thank the A&I accounting team for helping me with this for several hours yesterday to make sure we had this done in time for today.
Very good. With that, commissioners, are there any questions on the expenses? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the expenses as submitted, and then I guess we can do reimbursements after that. If they're approved, they're good for reimbursements.
Yes, and I can work with the A&I on that.
Okay, thanks.
So moved.
It's been moved by Commissioner Pope. Is there a second?
Second?
It's been seconded by Commissioner Wallace. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That nays, that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item on our list, again, review of proposed budget policy. This I had originally intended to be a fairly straightforward policy around moving to a place where I, in my position as the executive director, could authorize reimbursements and disbursements of payments under a certain threshold, dollar threshold, without having to come to the commission for that. Certainly for smaller things, and we can go through what that means. However, as I started drafting this, this did morph a little bit, and I will be candid, I'm the only one who's seen this so far until this morning. This did morph a little bit to start including other things beyond just reimbursements. I did start thinking about how a policy, any kind of fiscal policy that our agency has, would apply to things like cryptocurrency wallets that started as a kind of thought exercise around, dollar amounts and who should be holding what and ability to open wallets on a personal or behalf of the committee. Then that got me started thinking about multi-signature wallets and different security thresholds we might need in the future, as well as things like restrictions. I will say I've already been offered a nice welcoming gift from external parties. I had to turn that down. I think we should probably have a strict no gift policy here, as well as other restrictions around being able to use Wyoming stable tokens to a certain amount, to be able to generate revenue off of Wyoming stable tokens, any amount, and then also potentially requiring disclosures from myself as the executive director, potentially the next executive director, should there be one, and any employees of the commission. So I've thrown a lot at you, and that's kind of all over the place. I'm happy to kind of break this down section by section, but I think this may become one or more documents, one or more policies. I think that these are all important things to consider earlier on than later on.
Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I think it's falling all the way up until the prospect of, eventually, this is supposed to be a self-paying system, and we are gonna get money in some manner, way, shape, or form from investments or otherwise from the stable token. And the director is probably gonna have, access to those. But wanted to make sure that that maybe we have maybe another approvement process before we authorize, by the commission, before we authorize that function to move forward, rather than putting in this and then thinking that it's automatic when at the director's purview. So I guess that little hurdle is the only thing that I would suggest that we may at least have a discussion on.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. To that extent, I do want to point out specifically what we have in section 2B2, which talks about multi-signature wallets. Particularly when money starts flowing into this agency, the thought is I should not be the only person with the authority to touch any of that. That should be a process that we do with what's called a multi-signature wallet, where to move funding around, it would require multiple parties to kind of turn their keys at both times, like in the nuclear submarines. So we would have what's called a signing ceremony with multiple participants involved. And actually, one of the things I wanted to highlight here, again, going a little bit down the rabbit hole on this, is what the minimums for signatories on those processes would look like. 2 out of 3 would probably be the minimum we'd ever want. And as we get more and more revenue into this organization, knock on wood, you'd want to kind of scale that up. And there's a little bit of wording here around that, but I think we're mostly on the same page there.
Thank you. Director, I think, the fact that you indicated how complex this issue can come, I imagine this is gonna have to be revisited, but do members of the board or the commission have some thoughts on this policy?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mr. Pope?
the overall structure of the policy, I have no problems with. Some of the amounts, I think we need to probably discuss at some point, and we need to discuss, I believe, the overall concept of it from an auditor's point of view, and make certain that we have included in this proper checks and balances. I have not had a chance to review this in detail, so I'm not yet prepared to comment on that side of it. I do believe we need this type of policy in place, though, and I think that that in constructing it, this is how it should be constructed in many ways. So that's my comment on it. I don't think I would be ready to vote yea or nay on this draft yet.
Commissioner Naves, any thoughts that you have on this? And then I might have Mr. Kenny come back up.
Governor, I agree that we can continue to work on the draft and add more clarity. It will be great to get feedback from the other commissioners on some areas of concern. So at the next time in which we present something, it can be worked on. It is critical to ensure that management of these reserves and the accounts is done in a way that is not giving one single party control over these funds, to take any action that could be contrary to any interest. So we want to make sure that it is industry practice, that as the executive director highlighted, that there are different authorizations and certain types of controls put in place for that. So we can certainly continue working on it and present it at the next meeting. But it would be great to receive feedback from any commissioners that do have any concerns about the policy in anticipation of the next meeting so that we can take action on it.
Okay? That makes sense to me.
Mr. Chairman, I think some of the ways that we've done it in the past in different areas is that you have basically a spending account, and you have an investment account, and so and I think that's probably the way that it would kind of function as it grows. So you've got that I guess that clear level, and that would be maybe a commission approved appropriation, and then how you use it, if you use it as stable tokens or cash or however, that's fine. And then if you think there's probably a level there where I know in our shop you've got approved signatories that are just one signature. So at some point in time you may have a deputy. The deputy can do that, or you can do that, or whatever. So there's flexibility in there. And I guess I'm kind of intrigued that you think we can actually have wallets, and we can actually spend our stable tokens and pay things with it in short order. But that kind of gets into the retail aspect to a certain extent, or just how that is. It'd be kind of interesting to have that discussion about that. But yeah, I think that we're definitely going to move down this thing, and you do need to have basically spending authority within your division. And I think that we do it as an appropriation. And once we get to a cash flow and get a good idea, then we probably authorize a budget amount on a monthly thing and put maybe a 30 or 50% at 150% or something like that of the budget. So you get the flexibility to operate your agency irrespective of micromanaging, you know. And so we want to get there, I think, as soon as possible. And as soon as we have a budget, I think, then I think that we can do that, you know, basically commission authorization to give you, you know, a good account to spend from. And if you want to do it from tokens when the time is set up, that I don't have any problem with that. But to our accountants, I guess, concerns is that, yeah, let's get all our audit trail, our accounting system set up, and so we know that as it's being done, it's put in the right spot, and we're taking care of it.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Commissioners, when we broached this topic, what was running through my mind was the expediency that the director would have not having to come to commission to get all reimbursements. And so I just want to, I mean, I understand the policy needs to be worked a little bit more, but I wanted to get your sense of the first provision, which, you know, has direct payments, recurring payments, reimbursements, prepayments, and professional services. I wonder if we, again, noting that, you know, we're going to have an accounting at regular intervals of what these payments are. And I didn't know if you thought this was a wise course. And I honestly, Director Apollo, there's a bunch of stuff you're going to start asking for and needing. And so I guess I'm just wondering from the commission if you have any particular heartburn with passing one, understanding it could be revised and the policy itself will be augmented as we go forward.
Mr. Chairman, I have just made some notes, and these are very, in my mind, it's just detail stuff that I suppose we can work out, but under B, reimbursements, and really even any of these reimbursements, the person or vendor or whatever must first be set up in WOLFs. You know, these would have to be reported to the commission on the next regularly scheduled meeting. And, you know, I also, there's a practice of approving vendors ahead of time under professional services. I think the commissioners in group need to approve these vendors before this latitude is given, especially, you know, a $10,000 payment is 2% of our entire budget for the commission. And so again, I have questions about some of the details on how this would be administered by us and the oversight of it. No issues whatsoever with the practice of some of this. I think we need to fill in or maybe adjust some of the amounts and add detail as to what the actual procedures are under which Director Apollo can use this authority.
That's a good point, Commissioner Pope. And you know, as they move from relatively benign to more complicated in this policy, that was, I think, is a good point. Mr. Kenny, just wonder, maybe this is not for you, and we don't have the good auditor here, but you do have to have pre-approved vendors. They have to establish themselves as vendors. I guess so that makes some sense, and that would be a topic, I think, for this commission to review those. I guess the one The one thing I'm worried about is just travel expenses and incidentals and all that sort of stuff, which most of that is carried either under 1A, pretty much that, right? 1A and maybe 1B. But I think 1A probably gets you started.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. In some of those travel and incidentals, I think we probably don't need to approve ahead of time in most circumstances. However, the reporting still needs to be there in
Right.
in the end. And I think, again, my biggest in C and D, well, not really C, but D, the professional payments and all of that. That's something I think we would at least need to approve the vendors ahead of time.
I couldn't agree with you more, so. Mr. Kenny, are you familiar with the process for selecting a vendor and how that proceeds?
Only peripherally. No, this would probably be a better question for the auditor, who unfortunately is not here today. But I do believe it is correct, Chairman, Commissioners, when you mentioned that a person has to be set up in the system in order to be paid. I think even employees have to be set up in the system, so other vendors do as well. But beyond that, about the technical process of how that goes about, I do not have any firsthand knowledge.
Okay. And Director, do you have a P card?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not at current time, but I have all the forms to get set up with one whenever I have a moment.
Okay. Well, members of the commission, I think the work that Commissioner Alves and Director Apollo and others have done in this is really a good starting point. I would like to, at least today, be able to sort of see if there's a way that we can extend a little bit of latitude to the director for incidentals and minor payments. And the provisions under A and B seem like a good starting point. But if you have particular issues, and I don't want to push the issue, I just am trying to make sure we are efficient in how we handle things.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Pope.
Thank you. I believe without approving this whole policy, we should be able to grant these certain powers just via vote of the commission and set the full policy aside for future under A. If we were to grant that, I would probably not want to grant A1 under its current language, any one-time payment to a third party. I think that would need to be more explicit as to who that would be. Under A2, I have the same sort of issue with that. However, I also know that our website has a small minor cost per month, and that would fall under A1 or 2. So I think just further figuring out how to define that would be my issue. Under B, I really don't have a lot of issues in the short term with that, and I think any issues in language that I have that I might have or later come up with, we can address in a future meeting. So reimbursements, I think that's something that is necessary. And then I would add to any powers that we grant under these as a commission that reporting of the expenses or approvals that Mr. Apollo or Director Apollo provides would have to be reported at the next regularly scheduled
Absolutely. Yeah.
commission meeting.
Yep.
And then I think we can take the entire policy as a draft and work forward with it and maybe adjust it for the next meeting and see if we have a finished product or even close to a temporary finished product at that point.
So that sounds fine to me, Commissioner Pope. The only other thing, just from a practical matter, I don't think it needs to include cryptocurrencies because we don't really have that facility yet. So, I mean, I'm happy to keep the language fiat currency, but, and understand it's just a stopgap. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
pardon the interruption, but Joel and Flavia have had their hands raised for
Oh.
a few minutes.
terribly sorry. I can't see the hands up there, so let me, Commissioner Revelle.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've just hit on it in your last comment. I am comfortable with where the commission is headed with regards to the amounts and the approval processes for fiat payments, but I would not at this time be comfortable with allowing access to some digital wallet without a more thorough verification and kind of multi-party authentication process that Mr. Apollo referred to earlier. So I would not want to set up wallets or allow for digital asset payments at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Flavis.
Mhm. Thank you, Governor. I think Joe covered what I was about to say. Let me just lower my hand here. That's the statement that I made earlier as well. We can fine tune and add additional clarity on the authentication of payments. And this is in regards to digital wallets. I do not have a concern with the payments on fiat currency. Understanding, and I think this is added clarity for the entire commission, that payments will be made to vendors that have been onboarded and approved by the commission. So the commission will approve the vendor, then it will be onboarded by the proper processes that the state requires. And then these payments need to be made pertaining to these approved vendors that have been onboarded by the state process. So to the earlier comment about adding just day-to-day management of these vendors and entitling the executive director to take the role of managing these vendors, I believe the appropriate authority for him to make payments to approved vendors that have gone through the onboarding process is appropriate. If there are any questions about third-party payments that are unapproved vendors or have not gone through that process, then maybe it's a question that we can clarify. However, in my perspective is that if the vendor has been approved by commission, that vendor would have provided a budget which have been reviewed and approved by commission, and then the vendor has been onboarded by the state in its vendor process, the executive director will be fulfilling its obligation to manage that vendor by approving payments under that approved process. However, if there's additional clarity that is needed to address any considerations by my fellow commissioners, to the point that I made earlier, we can clarify. Will be great just to get those comments ahead of time so we can keep moving ahead instead of having to deliberate in the meetings and then not be able to take action. And the last comment, Anthony, I don't know if you can cite to the commission if it's relevant. In drafting this policy, have you relied on any other policies from the state as a frame so that you could create something that is already utilized by Wyoming, or did you come up with this one as a clean draft?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Naves, for your question. This was drafted solely by myself. Again, I'm not aware of any particular policies that would have anything to do with, digital wallets, multi-signature wallets, and that's how this kind of ended up going. I'm happy to dig into the existing statute with the A&I accounting team, who, again, has been tremendously helpful over the last, day and change, getting the expenses ready for us. They may have some thoughts on this as well. But I think the feedback is well taken, and we need, a couple more checks and balances, and we need some additional descriptions and definitions in here. If I can just interject with a quick example of why I wanted to incorporate this, particularly around professional services, and again, noting that I did not include language I likely should have around the pre-approval process. I could foresee there being circumstances where we've onboarded some of these professional services companies, whether that's legal, whether that's a Big Four auditor that we've been talking about, where we agree to a certain amount of, contractually, we agree to a certain amount to pay them. And then there's a slight change order along the way that increases our scope. And that change order is going to incur an extra $7,500 worth of fees. If we're already making change orders, I want to make sure we have the ability to react quickly to those and make sure that we have the ability to disperse funds in those instances rather than having to potentially call special sessions or other types of meetings to approve smaller chunks of budget from the commission.
Mr. Treasurer,
Yeah.
did we lose Commissioner Navas? Nope, she's back.
Oh.
Thank you.
I think Commissioner Nava said something about an approved budget, so are we going to get into the budget process here later on the day so we can actually approve a budget? So, I mean, I'm fine with fiat currencies all the way through D myself, as long as, we have the sideboards on it and an approved budget. So, because if we contract with people, you got to write the check. I mean, yeah, we can't, I mean, that's just the way it works. So, I don't know what our burn rate is on a monthly basis, but it'd be nice to kind of get a budget that said, okay, as these vendors go on, this is going to be what our burn rate is. We understand it, we approve that, and then have, 10,000 bucks or something that's on the side of it that can go above that before you have to go back to the commission, and at some point in time, you're going to be, from my perspective, you're almost going to be like an instrumentality. You're going to be free and clear from us, and you're going to, run the shop. We're going to have some degree of reliance on your expertise, and sooner rather than later. But I guess we do need kind of an idea what that burn rate's going to be, so we can understand how things are rolling.
Through the chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. To answer your question, there's two answers, essentially. One is in terms of the near-term budget. I'm working on that with Rory on the A&I team. We've already prepared the budget summary. We've made sure we've got the appropriate series codes in there based on what we're doing, because we've been given essentially a fairly general bucket of funds. Now we're starting to segregate that into where we think that money's going to go, whether that's legal services, whether that's technology. So that's kind of the near-term budget with the $500,000 that the agency has been allocated. And we'll have those projections definitively by, the next meeting of this commission, if not part of the November 1st report, which is what I'm shooting for.
In the interim, what do you need to be approved? 50,000, more, less, just?
Through the chair, I think in the near term, I think we'll probably need somewhere around $25,000 to get us to the end of the year if we are going to endeavor to actually issue a token by the end of the year, which I don't think is a very large chunk of change, all things considered. We've already allocated the funding for legal, which I expected to be the big piece. And I think we're running everything pretty lightweight. I come from a startup background where 500K is a year and change of runway. So we're going to run things lean, and we're going to continue to do so. And we're also going to use our position as the first state looking to issue a stable token in the public sector as a way to drive a hard bargain.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I don't know if we can do a motion that takes into account, you know, that it's a fiat, that it's to approve vendors, and it could be, you know, on behalf of the commission, I'd say A through D, because we're gonna have professional services. I think 25,000 is probably light. I'd say I'm closer to 40,000 as far as between now and the end of the year without further commission approval. But as long as we have those sideboards on there, but, you know, we're kind of voting on a spending money in a manner which it's, yeah, you don't have actually everything in black and white before you. I think we have a good idea what the black and white is. But I guess I'd leave it to you as to whether, because we don't want to meet, you know, every week. Could we have it approval pending an email ballot on the I guess the amendments on this?
We can consider that. Let me ask Commissioner Pope if he has some comments on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I think Director Apollo is very optimistic about that, that $25,000 figure. But I also think that between now and our next meeting, I don't believe we're going to run into any cost overruns on the legal services, which, to my knowledge, that's the largest vendor we have approved so far. And I think we have time to get D ironed out and I would also like Commissioner Racina's, being the auditor, I would love to have her comments on some of this too. I do believe two things, that we can vote separately on an initial $50,000, which is double what Director Apollo said. And I know in building a house, you double the estimate and double the time as well. But so I think we can vote separately on like a $50,000 initial allocation for what Director Apollo is doing. But I'd like a separate vote on granting these powers, if I may ask that, because I think it's that way we're separating the amount from the policy, and that's what personally I would prefer to see.
Mr. Chairman, that's appropriate, and if that's a motion, I would second the $50,000 ask.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded, I assume.
Second, yes.
It has been seconded. Is there any discussion? This motion is for 50, and Commissioner Wallace.
Mr. Chairman, could I just want to clarify what that motion is? That basically we're allowing the director to spend $50,000 on approved vendors? Is that what the motion says?
Well, we'll get into the second part of that. That's the second part of the motion. You wanted two motions, so we're just authorizing up to $50,000, you know, as approved, in a manner approved by the commission. Now we got to approve. We vote aye for this, then we have to approve the manner.
Okay. It's good government accounting here. We'll just take a bunch of money and then we'll put restrictions on it if we can.
That sounds good.
All right. With that, further comments, questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, that motion does carry. Now I think we start to talk about the way we govern those.
You want to do it line by line, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, let's see, Section A, direct payments, line 1, after the A, after 2, delete A, third party, and insert an approved state vendor.
Okay,
Then, Mr. Chairman, in line 2, after fiat,
strike the remainder.
strike the remainder.
So you all have that. It now reads, any one-time payment to an approved state vendor in an amount up to $1,000 in fiat.
Yeah, and I don't know whether we need fiat this time. We could just say up to $1,000, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Yeah, let's just strike, after 1,000, put a period, delete the comma, put a period, and strike the balance.
Any,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
if I could make one semantic suggestion, we would use a vendor approved by the state, not a state vendor, approved state vendor. That way, I think it adds a better connotation that we as a state are approving whoever it happens to be.
Yeah, that's fine with me, Mr. Chairman.
all right. You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Pope. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays, I think that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on second page, on 2, essentially the same language after payments, delete to a third party and insert, I think that was a vendor approved by the state in an amount up to $1,000 in aggregate for the fiscal year.
That motion's been made.
And then, but I think, I think I have to go in and say at the time of payment, $1,000 aggregate value at the time of payment. That gets the time aspect in there.
Further comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I believe we probably should not include at the time of payment,
Okay,
because if we're gonna, this is a recurring charge,
Right.
it's gonna be multiple times of payment over the course of the year, and I probably should not have put that language in there in the first place.
okay, yeah. Yeah, I thought you were gonna, the way you had it, it was like, the most you're gonna do is $1,000 in a year. Yeah, so that's all right with me, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a problem
All right.
with deleting that then.
Just through the chair, rereading this, I think the time of payment was in response to the cryptocurrency piece, which we are now removing anyway. So I don't think that would hold.
Okay.
All right, is there further discussion? So as I'm reading it now, it says, if this is your motion, sir, a series of recurring payments to a vendor approved by the state in an amount up to 1,000 in aggregate for the fiscal year period.
Yeah.
If that is your motion, I'll ask for a second. There is a second by Commissioner Wallace. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries.
Then, Mr. Chairman, on reimbursements in paragraph 1, delete the comma after 1,000, put a period, and delete the balance of the paragraph.
Okay. Further comment? If not, should anyone be so inclined, I would appreciate a second.
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Pope. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries.
And Mr. Chairman, on 2, in the third sentence after year, delete the comma, insert a period, delete the balance of that, or delete the balance of the paragraph.
Is there a second for that? there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Pope. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you always get into this as a date of filed, so I guess that's the date that's basically it's gonna be filed and it's received. So is it filed when you mail it? Is it filed when you get on your computer? Is it filed when it's received by the office? If you file it on the 90th day at 5:05, has it not received during the business day? There's those little gray areas there, so I'm not sure if it's going to be really necessary to go to the gray areas, but if we want to, we can go in there, filed on, is not filed otherwise within 90 business days of being incurred by the commissioner. And so then, you know, it's at the end of the business days, it actually extends the amount of time because you take your weekends out, but it's entirely up to, you know, if there's some discussion on it, that's fine.
And Director Paulo, this serves to give you the backing to be able to make a decision on whether you're going to reimburse somebody if they're not timely in their submittal.
Mr. Chairman, that would be correct. I think this is a bit of a holdover from my old KPMG and Big Four days. Really, going back to the treasurer's point from earlier, we need to have a fairly good idea of what the burn rate is going to be for any given month. We've got to keep this tight. And if people are going to try to submit, you know, $10,000 worth of reimbursements on a, 4-month lag, that's not really going to jive too well.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'd say 60 business days. Then to get rid of the weekends, and I think it's clear there.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? Yeah. Are you making that motion,
Yeah,
sir?
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is further comments, discussion? Is there a second? Is there
I would second it for discussion purposes.
Okay. It's been seconded for discussion purposes.
I'm not going to live or die on this one, Mr. Chairman. If everybody's got another day, I'm fine with it. I just want to move that concept along,
Right.
so, but have the sideboards in there that we know if it's the end of 5 o'clock
Yeah.
or whether, it's midnight.
Mr. Pope.
Mr. Chairman, as someone who procrastinates on submitting reimbursement requests, I would love to still see 90 days, and I don't. For me, I'm not going to be running it over at 5 o'clock at night. I think 90 actual days as opposed to business days, I would accept, and I'll vote even yay on 60 days. I just think sometimes that I would love that extra time, to be honest.
Midnight it is, Mr. Chairman. Okay, all right.
If you want to amend that, then
I'll withdraw my amendment. If the second's amicable, doesn't mean anything.
is that all right? You amicable to that?
I'm amicable to it, yes.
Okay,
thank
so
you.
we're back to the language is in front of us. Further discussion? Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I think we have.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries. The one area that I think that Commissioner Pope brought up would be that there'd be regular reporting of all expenditures at the next commission meeting. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct, and I would move that all of these policies that we have put in place require that reporting. If it's possible to do that and have it apply to these previous motions.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I was gonna go down and try C and D and put it at the end of that. I think that's proper place. I agree with the reporting requirement. But I'd like to see whether we can, what the thoughts are on C and D. And
Okay.
so if it's okay, we have those discussions and.
Sure.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I would, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I believe I did state that in the language of a motion, so I would withdraw that motion right now.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm fine with C on the prepayments.
Okay. Is there further comment on that? If there isn't a second?
Mr. Chairman,
No.
if I could quickly just contextualize the number here, this
Yeah.
is something that I would look forward to using regarding any kind of SaaS services that we have. Things that are going to be kind of recurring on a monthly basis, like Notion at $20 a month, like ChatGPT at $20 a month. You put a couple of those services together and perhaps even migrating Zoom that we've been using. And thank you again for your office for letting us borrow it for the last couple of sessions, but we might be having Zoom on our kind of bill from here on out. So the P card would simply be to capture all those recurring services instead of having to reimburse things over and over again. It would all get captured in one place.
Okay. So the treasurer has put forward C as a motion. Is there a second?
I'd second.
Okay, Commissioner Wallace has seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Okay, that motion carries.
Professional services, Mr. Chairman, in paragraph 1, the second sentence, after the $10,000, delete the comma, insert a period. And delete the balance of that paragraph.
So you're saying in D1, after the period, is to delete the rest of the sentence. You're not saying delete 2, or are you?
No, I'm not saying delete 2.
Okay.
I thought we just,
All right,
okay.
yep,
yeah.
good. All right. Further, Director Apollo, is any magic to the number there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I kind of gave in that example earlier, I think any kind of change order, I would want to limit below that and candidly well below that. But when I start thinking about, marketing groups I've worked with in the past, particularly in the Web3 space, it's always been kind of a minimum of $5,000. So it's one of these situations where I could see us looking to onboard a marketing team. That's the first month, they get them approved. And then if we want to bring them on for another month, if things are going well or not, we have a discretion to do that. So perhaps there is no magic to the number per se, but I could see change orders going up to that amount. And beyond that, I would want to make sure that the commission is involved in the process. As Commissioner Pope mentioned before, 10K is 2% of the budget, right? So I want to make sure anything above that, we would kind of get back together and discuss before we kind of approved it unilaterally.
Okay, Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm going to restate my limited, I guess, opposition to either D1 or D2 at this point, because I'd love to hear from Auditor Racina's on her comments on how this is worded and how we move forward with this. But Director Apollo, when would you, given that we have a report due to the legislature next month and we are in the process of writing that report, when would you expect to need to onboard a marketing company that?
Through the chair. Thank you, Commissioner Pope. I would not expect to bring on a marketing team anytime soon. I don't expect to bring on a marketing team until we have a token that's pretty much live and ready to go. That was simply an example of a recurring monthly payment that I've dealt with in the past that could reach that amount over the course of a year. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Mr. Chairman, I think I want to withdraw that amendment if the second is amicable to it, and make an amendment on both 1 and 2. And first of all, I'll take the 10,000 down to 5,000 in both those. The same deletions in 1, in paragraph 2, after fiscal year, put a period and then delete the balance of that. So essentially what we've done is that the aggregate for reoccurring is going to be 5,000 in aggregate for the fiscal year, and 5,000 for any one-time payment to a contractor provider for professional services. So that'll take us down a lot, give, I think, some ability to I guess, address situations that happen outside of the course of the commission meeting. But the commission at any time can raise that if there's a case given, and so I think that gives us a little bit more ease and just an easier feeling about the amount of money that's going out because of the limited budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I think the motion we have on the table was really only covering 1, but
Yeah,
I think.
and I withdrew that pending the approval of my second.
Know that we had a second.
We didn't have a second on that one?
We didn't have a second.
Okay, all right,
so-
okay. Well,
So if you're moving the first, we'll be consistent with our practice so
okay,
far.
okay, I'll
Yeah.
move the first, Mr. Chairman, and
Okay,
just take the 10 to 5 and delete the, put a period in and delete the balance of the paragraph.
all right. Is there a second?
Yes, I think I'm amenable to that edit, and in the interest of getting a policy that Director Apollo can work with.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just kind of had a question in general as far as, is there any standard procedure that the state uses or A&I uses for handling change orders or something like this? And do we need to make sure we're following any standard state procedures for that? Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Pope, to be directly responsive, I don't think Mr. Kenny might have an idea. Deputy Anderson may have an idea, but I don't know if we have any real definite light on that. So, Commissioner.
Chairman, Commissioner, in terms of the mechanics, I don't know that there is one in terms of like the contractual perspective, for example. A change order would generally be considered a contractual amendment. We don't necessarily go through the same contractual process, but ideally we do. We would amend, we'd have some kind of formal contractual amendment, and it would go through the same AG approval process as far as that goes. They don't always happen that way because technically the agency could just sign an amendment. That's technically what a change order is. You're technically amending the contract to add more money to it, and maybe adding scope depending on what the reason for the change order is. But beyond that, I don't know that there is any from the Attorney General's office perspective. There may be from perhaps A&I or somebody else is aware of some.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know there's some threshold there on 900 series and contracts that you can go up without having to go back if you have it in your budget. So you can do that internally, but I'm not sure what that is.
Commissioner
But
Pope.
I think 5,000 is probably under it.
I think we can maybe add the caveat, possibly pending that none of this conflicts with current state policy. And again, I think that this would be where at the next meeting, possibly Commissioner Racinas could help us amend this.
Yeah.
I'm happy to vote yes, in the current language or in the amended language, just because I think we need that we need to grant Director Apollo those powers.
Yeah. And I think there's a cleanup motion at the end, which is basically not in opposition to any of the state policies or the full accounting delivered. So anyway, further conversation. Hearing none, we're on number 1, which states any one-time payment to a contracted provider of professional services in the amount up to $5,000, period. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Mr. Treasurer, you want to make that similar motion for number 2?
Just gonna do a little math. We got 80,000 on our, that would be $6,667 if we were gonna make sure that we have a reoccurring payment to the attorney on a monthly basis. So we probably should at least account for our current contract of 80,000. I better turn this, I think we should, probably make sure we can pay the 80,000 to our attorneys, and that's divided by 12, that's $6,667. So, yeah, I don't know whether that's on an annual basis. Maybe Director Apollo can enlighten us about what that is.
We are still working through the contract. Okay, thank you. We are working through the specifics of the payment process with external counsel as we speak. I think that's one of the items that Mr. Kenny referred to a little bit earlier in the discussion today. So hopefully we'll know that by the end of the day and hopefully get that signed. That being said, my understanding is because we approved the spend of up to $100,000 at the last meeting of the special meeting that we had on October 4th, we would not need to worry about these kinds of one-time payments that would
Okay.
crop up that I would need to handle directly because we've already had that approved.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think the cleanup on that would be, is that it would be 5,000 in aggregate for the fiscal year or an amount directly approved by the commission.
Okay, now, yeah,
Yeah, so-
I'm
so
okay
rather
with
than-
that, Treasurer. I think
Yeah.
when they're approved technically, they should be able to be spent. I mean, you're putting
Right,
it.
right, okay.
These
All right.
are only.
Yeah, yeah, okay, so these are things that are one-offs, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so I'll take the 10 down to 5 and put a period after year, delete the balance of the paragraph.
Very good. Commissioner Pope.
I would second that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. Thanks.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would delete 2A and B.
And actually, Mr.
Or do
Treasurer.
we just
I-
not
I-
even just pass the ones that we
That
voted on?
was kind of where I was,
Okay,
because we'll
all right.
work the rest of this
Okay,
in the interim.
yeah, and
Um,
I guess,
And the only thing now is just the, not in opposition of current
right,
policy and, or not policy, but other state policy or procedure and with a full accounting delivered.
okay, so that's your guys' amendment, and I'll agree with it. I wholeheartedly, whatever that.
I'll let Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if we may want to take up item 3 restrictions, at least A, or if we do the cleanup motions first.
And why don't we do the cleanup motion so it's coherent
Specifically.
within that policy, and then I don't disagree with the gifts, so.
Okay. So the first motion that I would make would be that none of these powers that we have granted will be in opposition to, or these powers may be limited by state law and policy. And I'm not exactly sure how to phrase that, not being a wordsmith here. But that's basically what we need to make certain that we continue to follow state law and prior policy.
Mr. Kenny, have you got any brilliant?
I was just trying to write something here, but I'll just try to say what I was thinking and hopefully it comes out coherently. Something like the director's authority under this section is limited and limited and subject to state law and state policy, something like that. I'm gonna wordsmith it from there, but
That's, Mr. Chairman, that is exactly what I was going to say.
That sounds like a great, that is a great motion. And it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And Commissioner Vell, is that an aye? Yeah, okay, very good. That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to make a motion that any of the powers that we have granted to Director Apollo under these motions retain a requirement for full accounting of the exercise of those powers at the following regularly scheduled commission meeting.
Okay,
I'll second that.
and that's a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. You had 3A.
Yes, Commissioner, or Mr. Chairman. I believe that 3A is a little bit different from state policy, which places a monetary limit on gifts or meals and stuff like that. Should we create this to reflect state policy and just reinforce state policy, or should we take the extra effort to eliminate those?
Mr. Kenny.
Chairman, I wouldn't necessarily see an issue. I mean, this doesn't conflict with state law because, I mean, that's just state law prohibits, receiving gifts over a certain amount. So prohibiting them entirely doesn't conflict. It's not like that you're required to allow them to receive gifts. So if you were to adopt this policy, I would think that would be fine from a legal perspective. If you were going to adopt an identical policy to the one in statute, it would be fine. I would suggest it's redundant in that instance. I mean, it doesn't really achieve anything more than what statute already says. I realize, I do recognize that we would be, in effect, kind of seconding the statute, but it is a statute and it is a statute that applies regardless of how the commission decides to act. So if you were going to amend it to be identical, I would suggest that it just be dropped entirely. Otherwise, but if you were going to have it be more restrictive than statute, I mean, less restrictive would be meaningless because it wouldn't do anything because the statute would trump it. Identical would be just redundant, but if it's going to be more restrictive, then I think that's fine.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, the only thing I was looking at this is that I think the state statute says that it's that you personally can't accept those, but you can accept gifts on behalf of the state. And so I don't see that. I guess my question would be, would that preclude the director or employees accepting gifts on behalf of the state? I think this language would.
Chairman, Commissioner Treasurer, I would agree. From the way this is written, I think that would be the best read of it. I mean, it's not clear on that point, but I would say that the way this is written, it's broad enough. I mean, it says accepting any gifts. I mean, it doesn't say any purpose. If it said any purpose, then I would be definitively sure that was what was intended, or at least that's how broad it is. But from accepting any gifts, I would think that would mean that they simply couldn't accept any gifts, period.
Yeah, and I don't know whether or not the statute says that we can accept, monies to run this program from foundations or anything like that. I mean, a lot of different areas in the statute, they have that for like the state fair in different areas. So I'm not sure whether or not that is in there, or whether if a foundation wanted to give some money to the program just to see, for whatever reason, then we'd be precluded.
Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Kenny.
I was going to say, Commissioner,
The commission could accept it, but the commissioner could.
yes,
Of course, we're state employees.
I'd have to pull up the statute. I do not have it in front of me, the stable token statute, but I don't recall anything. I am aware, as the treasurer stated, there are definitely other statutes and programs that specifically allow and call for third parties to, donate and to use those donations. I'm not aware of anything in this particular statute. I could go look and check and verify, but I don't think there is one.
So, well, members of the commission, I don't want to hasten us along, but in some ways, I feel we're going to work the rest of this policy anyway. And unless there's a crying need for this where we have statute, I would encourage us to move on to the next matters. Commissioner Pope.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I believe you are correct. As long as there is currently a statute covering this, once we start deviating from the statute in this restrictive of a manner, then the gifts, even the definition of what that is becomes, if we have a technical vendor that is wishing to provide free help to us, what does that entail? So I think since we have a statute that covers that anyway, I think we follow the statute, and if we see a need to amend it in the future, amend that or restrict even further from statute, I'm fine with that as long as we have the right definitions in place.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Director Apollo, I want to thank you for putting this together, certainly food for thought. I know you've worked with Commissioner Naves a bit on it, and I know Mr. Kenny's worked on it as well. It's a good start, and I appreciate it. Is there anything more to come before us on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing more on this at the moment. I think all of the feedback on section 1 is well taken. We'll get that drafted. Just as a quick note, so I can kind of move forward on this appropriately, what I'm hearing based on the feedback is this is probably a number of different policies kind of thrown into one. There's likely the financial powers we've talked about, the restrictions we'll continue to talk about, but when we start talking about things like digital wallets, multi-signature wallets, those will probably split out into personal policies for myself and subsequent employees of the agency, what they're allowed to do in their personal and business life. And then, as Commissioner Meyer kind of alluded to earlier, a whole separate policy for how reserves are treated and operational security is treated. That's a whole different can of worms. And I appreciate everybody taking the time to kind of hear me out on all these different things that are going through my mind. I appreciate us passing these resolutions to kind of get the reimbursements done expeditiously, and I'm happy to move on from there.
Very good. Thank you.
Governor, if I can say one thing before we leave this topic.
Absolutely, Commissioner Naves.
Thank you. So just to clarify, Anthony, I did not contribute to Anthony's work on this policy, although I do thank him for thinking about this and getting this ahead of the commission. And I'm happy to work with him more extensively in the edits that the other commissioners presented to ensure that there's alignment going forward. I would also recommend, Anthony, that you meet with David and Kurt following this meeting separately to get additional feedback from them, and also with Christy whenever you have an opportunity, so that when you and I meet, we can have their rounded feedback and make sure that we propose edits that are reviewed in anticipation of the next meeting, and then we can accept the policy as presented. But I'm happy to work with you going forward on this.
Very good. Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moving on to the next agenda item we have here, which is subcommittees. So during the last discussion, our meeting in September, Commissioner Naves, I believe it was you who put forward the code of conduct for movement, which was discussed and then tabled. So to kind of do a little bit of a recap and then kind of talk about where we go from here. There was some questions regarding the code of conduct vis-a-vis how it impacted subject matter experts who participated in the subcommittee discussions, who were subsequently then going to be subject to the code of conduct. The initial code of conduct was drafted in one manner. It was subsequently updated to soften some of the language and make it less prescriptive and more judgment-based, is how I would personally characterize it. And those are changes we could certainly discuss today in a moment. But one of the things I wanted to talk about beforehand, before we get to the code of conduct, and Commissioner Naves, I will likely tag you in for that as well, is just a simple walkthrough of this chart that I've created, which is not so robust in its design, but this one right here. Will give an idea of how I'm thinking we can streamline some of the discussions that are being held by the subcommittees. So to date, there's been subcommittees writ large. There's been, those would include things like the Legal, Regulatory, and Compliance Subcommittee and the Token Design Subcommittee. There's been subcommittees of subcommittees, as far as I understand them, such that the RFP Subcommittee was a subcommittee of the Token Design Subcommittee. So what I'd like to do is kind of separate subcommittees into three large buckets, which would be legal, technology, and economics. And then for all of the different things that we need under those kind of pillars, we would have what I would refer to as working groups, and perhaps that's a semantic change. But we can be much more agile with kind of more granular working groups that we can run as we need them. I would offer myself up as the one to organize and manage any of those discussions to the extent that they are formal meetings. I would also suggest that we run a large swath of this process through Notion and put our thinking on that repository, and then open up our design choices and our ideation to the public, to those subject matter experts, such that they may be able to comment on it in that public forum. So it would open it up as kind of a 24/7 process of having public comment rather than having, a meeting once a while that maybe some subject matter experts can't attend or would like to spend more time getting into the weeds on. And having a repository where all of that could take place, I think, is a good start to it. Then we would have the commission, the commissioners overseeing the whole process. So to the extent that commissioners still wanted to take place within specific meetings, they would be more than welcome to do so. Again, making sure we don't hit a quorum. But the thought is we would also still involve all the commissioners in the working groups that pertain to their own expertise. And the final note I want to throw out here is, I think the way we would onboard these subject matter experts is by having them fill out the code of conduct. And once I have a signed code of conduct in hand, I can then send that particular person a invitation to the Notion repository for them to collaborate with us. And that's how I would like to see this move forward.
Very good. Comments? Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. in looking at this, I think you have legal, technology, economics. Economics is really more operations, technology. What is a custodian? What is the custodian?
Well, that could be through the chair. Custodian would be, who's responsible for the wallets. That should likely say custodial wallets. These are some of the examples we took out of the prospective RFPs. So that would be, someone who would be running, potentially managing wallets on behalf of users or holders of the stable token.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, follow up?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that the headings are correct and make sure that we have the proper areas of responsibility within those headings. And so it'll take me a day or so to digest this. I think it's a great concept to separate under major and then minor headings and groups like this. I think we need a way to separate the subject matter experts from the commissioners that are overseeing some of these working groups and all of that as well. So I think this is where we need to go. And nothing on here and nothing we say today precludes us from rearranging these in the future either. So I love this concept. I think it'll provide more clarity as to what the areas of responsibility are. And I think I would say we should move forward with it and ask what you need from us as far as being able to then design this.
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Pope. I think it would just be an exercise of me actually mapping this out within the Notion platform and just assign roles to whoever kind of wants to take on different responsibilities. Again, we need to make sure, as far as I'm aware, we don't have more than 3 commissioners in any given call. So there's going to be some, sensitivity there. But beyond that, I think it's just a matter of standing these up, and they're not going to be all stood up at the exact same time. For example, we got marketing on here and customer service. Well, we're not going to have marketing or customer service until we have a token to market for the most part. So I think there's going to be an element of timeliness to this as well. And that'll be part of a broader discussion that we could have potentially offline. I think one of the things we've discussed publicly has been around the audit subcommittee. There's nothing to audit today. However, in my professional experience as a auditor, and then also seeking Big Four expertise on a security token project previously, that was 5 months before you can get a response back from the partner at one of the Big Four. So even though we don't need it today, it would behoove us to perhaps initiate those conversations sooner rather than later.
Yes, please.
I totally agree on that point. And I'm thinking that audit may be better served under legal and compliance, mainly because it's me, I prefer not to mix the audit side and with the operations side. I think there needs to be some separation there.
Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, but I think that you do have to have an internal audit yourself all the time. And I think that we also have to look at an operational audit, and that would be probably under technology. So you got different kinds of audits that occur in each one of these things. And especially in the beginning, just to make sure that we got some outside eyes looking at us in those different areas, and then developing that area expertise, because your compliance, I guess that's all your KYC and AML and all those other things. But yeah, I mean that's how we're set up in the state. We've got our internal audits, we've got auditor who doesn't audit. She's a comptroller basically, and then the audit is underneath the governor. So interesting, but trying to keep things away from different areas.
Through the chair, if I may?
Yes.
It's possible we have just a review layer in here across all three of these pillars, right? Because we're talking about internal audit versus external audit. Well, as you already alluded to, code audits also exist, right? Which would certainly be in the technology side of things. You know, I think we're going to probably be open sourcing most of what we're doing. It's kind of how this technology works to begin with, and the moat that we're building is regulatory, not particularly technological. But that being said, we need to make damn sure that the tech is good. And one of the things to consider before we go down too many rabbit holes is, again, where we start with which chain, because if we go across multiple chains, there's going to be multiple code audits for all of those things, and costs may scale exponentially, but user base may or may not. So just something to be considered.
So Director Apollo, I think one of the things about this is actually kind of the maturation of this process. And by that, I mean, you know, when we got started, we had subcommittees that had fairly interesting interplay with people and somewhat, I think, as we discovered, some expectations about what that meant. And I think what you're doing is kind of moving more to a working group model, because this commission, probably everybody on here is going to want to be part of everything. So, so I think I really commend you on that, and then getting the disciplines down, and then providing that recourse for public input and comment in a way that makes a lot of success. So I think I commend you on this model. And I think as we move towards things like RFPs and budgets and all that sort of stuff, we have to mature. We have to be a little more the responsibilities of this commission. So thank you.
Very welcome, Mr. Chairman. If there's no further comments, and I do not believe we need to take an action on this or vote on this. I don't believe subcommittees were established by votes. I think we're just able to move on with this format.
Yep.
Without issue. I would like to move something that will require a vote. And Mrs. Commissioner Naves, this is where I would likely turn it over to you. I'm happy to support, but I want to give you the floor for a few minutes.
Thank you, Anthony. So as the commissioners recall, at the last meeting we had, I proposed a subcommittee code of conduct, which will be binding upon members of the subcommittee that are not state employees or commissioners who already have duties to the state and the commission vis-a-vis the roles that they deliver. There was a healthy debate about the proposed code of conduct with questions from the public as well as my fellow commissioners. And we took note of the questions to address the concerns. I worked in partnership with the executive director, the Attorney General's office, as well, Commissioner Racines, to address the concerns. And the updated policy, as you have received in the package, should be reflective of all feedback received, not only by my fellow commissioners, but as well from the public. So I would submit the revised policy for your review and in anticipation of a vote. But happy to address any questions that my fellow commissioners may have, and obviously anyone that would like to express any concerns about the proposed policy.
Very good. Comments, questions?
Yeah, a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Commissioner Flavia, you talk about unfair dealing and self-dealing. You know, I think that's one of those things you know it when you see it, but I don't know exactly how to, or unfair advantage. And I'm not sure if you've got, let me kind of use a hypothetical. You've got subcommittee members that are I guess they could be potential vendors, or they have an area expertise that may down the road be utilized in some way or another. But they're engaging in the process, and and letting their, I guess, expert opinion be known. But someone else who is a potential competitor doesn't take the time to engage or move the process along. But at the, the time down the road, they both put a bid in. And there's going to be things that a subcommittee member is going to know that essentially the person who did engage may not know. But what duty do we have as a commission or the director's office has to, I guess if everybody has access to the minutes, how would a subcommittee member get an fair advantage, or what, as far as in the bidding process? I'm just curious how that may occur, or what it looks like.
So during the conversations in which subcommittee members participate, we deliberate about different topics. Obviously, everything for which a vote is required by the commission is presented to the public and becomes part of the public record. However, the discussions of the subcommittee members vis-a-vis just sharing of, information and thinking through some of these issues, this could be where we're discussing about this unfair advantage. However, if you take a look, Kurt, on section 2, which was extensively redrafted to address similar concerns, I would ask the commissioners, perhaps before we ask any further questions, if you need a minute to just read sections 2 and 3 and 4, that may be helpful and void some of the questions, but obviously I'm happy to address anything that remains outstanding.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Pope.
Thank you. And this question is directed to Director Apollo. Director Apollo, am I right in assuming, or in looking at our previous discussion, that you will be reorganizing the subcommittees, and those subcommittees then will bring in outside subject matter experts that are volunteering to provide information to those subcommittees, which right now we are in a model where those outside subject matter volunteers are actually part of those subcommittees. Is there a difference between your vision of that and what is currently being discussed in this draft?
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Pope. And I will also, again, defer to a certain extent to Commissioner Naves here, because I know she's been putting in the thrust of the effort on this. I think it's probably a simple semantic change, where if I was to adjust anything to this draft that's in front of us right now, what we're referring to subcommittees, I might refer to as working groups, just simply because that's the more granular version of this. But that just be me thinking from the bottom up rather than Flavia's thinking, which might be top down.
Yeah, Anthony, the working groups, David, are part of the subcommittees. So if you're part of a working group, you're part of a subcommittee by default, so it would apply. However, if you believe, to Anthony's comment, that adding that language will be helpful to clarify, we can certainly do. It's a very small edit. However, the principles behind this policy, which is again to address the conduct of the members of these subcommittees and working groups, is what we're trying to address here to ensure, again, the integrity of the process. But if you believe that adding working groups as a subset of the work committees, that would add clarity, we can certainly do. I don't see an issue, any issue in doing so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Follow up, please. Okay, so I I'm in favor of the amendments that Commissioner Navas made to the policy, and I intend to vote to put it into place. I just want to make sure that it will cover the structure that Director Apollo is envisioning on this. And so Director Apollo just once again outline what the differences are between what we are now doing or what you intend to do with this, and how that should be incorporated into this code of conduct.
Through the chair. Thank you, Commissioner Pope. I think the Occam's razor version of this is just definitional. We say the Wyoming Staple Token Commission established a number of subcommittees and working groups, and then in parenthetical, the subcommittees, and then the rest of this I think holds as it currently stands.
I think that works.
Thank you, Anthony. I agree with that. Yeah.
So I want to get this straight. So in section 4, I guess if there was anything on the website, the subcommittee member can disclose because it's available through the public. But I'm trying to figure out what information that we would have in a subcommittee or a working group that, unless you go in executive session, that wouldn't be available.
So Kurt, an example that Devin referenced earlier is the engagement of outside counsel and the participation in some of the subcommittee meetings to be able to listen to what the members are discussing and provide relevant input as needed. That relationship, because is privileged relationship as attorney-client, would require that information to be, protected, hence it's not public information. So that is just one example of something that I could see being an issue.
But if we had an attorney, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if we had an attorney that attended one of our subcommittee groups and he wasn't contracted or employed by us,
Mhm.
then there's no confidential requirement.
He is not engaged as counsel for the parties vis-a-vis there's no attorney-client privilege. That person is serving simply as, as a member of the committee, not necessarily in its legal capacity. For an example, I am a lawyer and I do not serve as counsel for the commission or for the state. I simply am a member of the committee and I have legal training. That's all it is. So it wouldn't be any different. However, if we retain counsel for the commission, that counsel is serving its capacity as counsel for the commission, that relationship is privileged.
Oh, right. If it's privileged information, he couldn't share it because that's our contract. But a member such as you could share any information that was at the committee because it isn't privileged. Is that where we're going?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. However, yes, any information that is available on the website is public and is not due to the bound of confidentiality. However, you asked for an example of information that would not be public in these subcommittees, and I gave the example of outside counsel participating in the subcommittee meetings whereby advice may be provided as part of that relationship. And as the Attorney General's office highlighted earlier, if there's a member of the subcommittee that is not bound to these duties, then there will be an issue in the participation of outside counsel because the privilege would be jeopardized.
If I may interject with a different example that might better represent the issue at hand here. Instead of counsel, let's talk code. So while we may choose to make our code, specifically the smart contracts that live on a blockchain, open source, and much of it is, we may be partnering with vendors who do things like analysis of blockchains. They may have proprietary code that they use to run their private organizations. As technical as I get, I'm probably not the person to be reviewing, Solidity code on Ethereum. We may have a member of the subcommittee whom we may want to help review the code of another organization we're looking at potentially partnering with. And I think that may, and again, Commissioner Navas, correct me if I'm wrong, but that might be another example of where this clause would come into play.
Yeah, information that is provided through the selection of vendors, the vendors provide certain information to the commission for its review that is that should be treated under certain provisions. Now, Anthony, I don't know, and I will defer to the Attorney General's office for the disclosure of what it is that is required under state law to be disclosed or not as part of the vendor selection process. But proprietary intellectual property, sometimes it is addressed separately. So I can't speak much to that, but I can see that also being an issue. I just don't know the boundaries of disclosure through the RFP process or what it is that is made public or not.
Yeah, and privilege and proprietary information, I can understand that. But I just wanted to know where we were drawing the line, so people don't necessarily step over a line they can't see. So if it's understood that it's privilege and proprietary information, then those are bright lines that people can see. And there are probably a lot of things that we don't want to publish everything, because you could, unless you get, ChatGPT and just let them listen to the whole conversation, and they can publish it and we can redact it. I don't know. So yeah, okay.
All right. Thanks. Further discussion? Further discussion? Okay, hearing none. What's the pleasure of the board?
Governor, I would like to present the code of conduct as currently drafted for approval by the commission and implement this policy with the edit that the executive director made in the definition of subcommittees to incorporate working groups and make that an effective policy as of today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there support for the Commissioner Nava's motion? Is there support?
I'd second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Wallace. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I did have some discussion, if I could, please.
Yes, Commissioner Revelle.
Yeah, thank you. There's one item in here, Commissioner Naves, that I wanted to ask about, which is that item 2B. If we are, I want to understand what would happen if we have a member of a subcommittee who does have a business interest that would potentially be a conflict. Do we want to necessarily exclude those individuals from that conversation? Do we need, because as we've discussed in the previous conversation around this topic, and in line with what Senator Rothfuss, when he spoke last time, we rely on subject matter experts who are almost by definition conflicted in some way. And do we want to have a line there where everyone has to recuse themselves from a conversation? This is the one bit of language that gives me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, so this is why, Joe, when we drafted it, so if you see the second language, we say, if the member has a conflict of interest, it shall disclose. That doesn't mean that that person at that point needs to recuse itself. However, if the conflict becomes material to the point in which the person's provision of their expertise could be, no longer serving the best interest of the subcommittee because is again relying on that person's, interest, then that person should recuse itself. But it's at the point in which that conflict becomes material, and this is why the second language was, the second sentence was added. So the goal again is that we do benefit of the experience of these individuals, which we understand to be critical. We want that expertise to be there and available. That individual should state, I do have a certain conflict of interest. However, that doesn't mean that that person should at that point recuse itself or from discussions. However, when that conflict becomes material, and material, it is an undefined term and can sometimes be subjective, that person should recuse itself. And it will be to some of the comments previously made, so that person doesn't have an unfair advantage vis-a-vis other individuals that could be potentially bidding for a service, that person will have additional information that other bidders wouldn't, and potentially, have an advantage in making an offer. So that is the spirit of B2B, how we thought about this, because we are very cognizant of the limited availability of subject matter experts for this endeavor. And we want to make sure that we benefit of all their expertise, while at the same time making sure that once that conflict becomes material, that there's a recusal so that there's no unfair advantage by that party being taken in the bidding process. Yeah,
You got
Joe.
Follow up from Commissioner Revelle.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Naves, for that clarification. And it is that second sentence of 2B that worries me a bit. And what you're saying makes good sense to me. The word material is modifying the conflict, and I think most everyone that we ask to help us as subject matter experts, if they are representing a firm that would potentially do business with the commission, that conflict is material. And so it's not that the conflict is material, it's just that there would be an action taken that could cause material harm. I just worry that there could be anyone who we are asking to be a subject matter expert who has an interest, a business interest, would have material conflict, and they could potentially be accused of an impropriety when in fact we're just seeking their input. So I guess I'm just a little concerned about that second sentence.
So let me see if I can give an example, Joe, for what we were thinking, and if this is helpful. So in the working groups, we are working now on the RFP, which is the next topic that we're going to be discussing. And the RFPs are going to be including different features for creation of the token, from the custodian, the wallet provider, the system integrator, there is a myriad of things. Let's say that as part of drafting the questionnaire for that RFP, we're soliciting folks to help us put that together, right? So we're getting members of these working groups to put those questions together to be able to have a comprehensive questionnaire. So if there's someone that intends to bid as a system integrator, for example, that person should not be creating the RFP for the system integrator. That person should say, hey, I'm sorry, Flavia, Joe, whoever it is that invited me, can participate in the RFP for the wallet custodian, but I cannot participate in the RFP for the system integrator because I plan to be a system integrator, to bid to be a system integrator. So this is an example. In this case, the conflict is material because that person could be influencing the questionnaire vis-a-vis the features, or that its products or services would offer to the state and tailor in a best way that person will have a benefit of other bidders. So this is an example of how this would be. Is there anything, Joel, that you believe that we could add clarity in the second sentence to meet the goal that I stated, or anything that would clarify any questions that you might have? We're obviously open to suggestions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Naves. That example that you gave was helpful. I think for me, and having seen how this works in the Blockchain Select Committee, it's the difference between someone disclosing a conflict of interest and recusing themselves completely from the conversation that is where I'm getting hung up. And so just to stick with the example you gave, that person who may be involved in the RFP process would you not want them to participate in a conversation, or would you just not want them to, would you want them to identify that they have a conflict, let people know that they have a conflict, but still give input versus they have to be completely recused from the conversation? I guess that's my.
It's the latter, not the former, Joe. So exactly that. So this is why the first sentence says what it says, and then the second sentence adds on, right? So the first sentence is someone that would be, for example, going back to my example, the system integrator. That person says, hey, I do have a conflict. I'm a system integrator, and I would like to participate and be a system integrator for the token. However, right now, I'm just giving my general knowledge of this process and everything, how we're thinking about this, right? And collaborating with you. Now, at the point in which an RFP is drafted for a system integrator, that party should not be part of that process, because that party could be tailoring the questionnaire vis-a-vis that party's products or services and best position, its company to win that bid. So again, we still want to rely on that person's expertise, and that person could quite certainly be equipped to support with other RFPs, because they have a lot of knowledge in this industry and they could help with other things. We still want to leverage their expertise, absolutely. We just don't want them to have an unfair advantage over other bidders. So this is the two sentences and how they work together.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, let me ask if Joel has any.
Yeah.
Commissioner Revelle, I've got the treasurer on wanting a question. Any follow-up there?
No, sir. Thank you.
Treasurer.
Yeah, I think, Commissioner Flavia, that this is going to happen in the RFP process at a different stage by all the vendors. Because when you send the RFP out, the vendors can send questions back to you about, what, to clarify what your idea is of what you're trying to do. And in that communication back to you by their questions, and you have to answer their questions, and each one of them can clarify and essentially do the same thing, only at a different time period to try to say, put their best foot forward in the process. So that's going to happen. When we talk about recusal, and for the most part, it's basically a recusal on voting, and we don't vote in subcommittees or working groups. But I think that if you can't have some expert guidance, about the process, and maybe you don't have enough expertise in the remaining members to actually put forth an RFP that touches all the points that need to be touched, then it's basically the blind leading the blind. So, we've got to figure out some way to get that information, into the RFP process early on. And maybe transparency would be the best way to do that to a certain extent, as far as, sharing a draft RFP process and asking for comments. I'm not sure if that's a proper way to do it or not, but I have difficulty precluding, the conversation. No difficulty in precluding the vote, but the conversation, I think, is it's going to be had at one point in the RFP, either in the replies from the vendors, and we may find out that we asked the wrong questions as far as, or asked for the wrong solutions from the vendors, not knowing that, the extensive expertise of everybody on this for all areas. I feel I'm kind of at a disadvantage, because I'm not sure how many people we know, or how many people that are going to be in the RFP process that's aware of every area that to a detailed extent in all the 19 or 20 different areas of vendors. So it just is, I just don't know whether we can prepare the right RFP, but I guess that's something we'll find out.
So Kurt, if I can address your question in parts. So the first one is about expertise. So as I stated to Joe, the goal is not to hinder participation of experts in this process. Quite the contrary. Again, restating the understanding that there is very limited pool of experts to participate. The goal is keep them engaged and actively contributing at all times. To the second point about voting, you're absolutely right. The subcommittees and the working groups don't vote, the commission votes. So there is no vote. The recusal here is in the process of, just again, getting engaged in the discussions and the work that is being done. To the third question about the RFP process and answering questions. Whoever bids for it will have its name, as someone that is asking a question from the commission to clarify the RFP, and we would be able to understand whether that person has been involved in the subcommittees or not, and whether that question is being derived from confidential information that person, gathered or expertise from those working group. So the group that will review the RFPs, the evaluating panel, will be addressing those questions in line. I want to state again that we want to have extensive participation of the group from the limited pool of subject matter experts that we can rely upon. However, I find it very hard to justify it from an integrity and best practices to let a party that has a conflict of interest to drive the questionnaire of an RFP that person is going to bid on. For me, from an optics perspective and how this could be seen as someone that is bidding on a service that the person drafted the questions for, it will give that person, in my perspective, an unfair advantage over others. So this is when this was drafted. There was a lot of thought put through this of how do we get people to help and how do we get people to bid. And how do we make sure that the people that are bidding are not driving this process in a way that could be with an unfair advantage to them? These are the principles that we're living by when we drafted this. Does this help, Kurt? And I see, Joe, you raise your hand, but Kurt, does this address your questions before?
Commissioner Meyer, if you want to.
Yeah, I guess when we look at conflicts in the legislative process, we disclose the conflict and we basically tell the members what that conflict is. And if there's any disagreement that we have a conflict, then there's a rules committee that tells us whether or not we do or don't have a conflict. And so, I think in that disclosure that existence, I think they should actually disclose what the conflict is and why they think they have a conflict. And then the members can, weigh that going into the process. And there's no vote. That all we do is, in that process is you recuse yourself from the vote, but you do have to disclose a conflict and what it is. And then the other committee members could probably say, well, that we believe that you would have an unfair advantage, and they would have to vote to say that no, you have to recuse yourself. So I think that to me is less subjective, and it gets more information out, and it's more transparent as far as the methodology of how you would work in a working group. But that's, I guess, a suggestion as how that recusal would come about. But yeah. So anyway, that's just from my experience.
Commissioner Revelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioner Naves, I agree with where Treasurer Meyer was going with this. I'm not an attorney nor a legislator, so I don't know exactly what recuse means in this context, but you know, as I looked it up, it was to remove oneself from participation. And that's what's giving me the pause with that word choice. And I think if there was a way to amend this language that allowed participation, but where the body could somehow recuse from the vote or the decision-making process, as Treasurer Meyer was just describing, that I think that, and but still allow participation, I would be comfortable with that.
Commissioner Navis.
I'm honestly struggling to make those edits that it would not in itself just let the person with a conflict of interest be part of a material process. That's what I'm struggling with. So I'm trying to, I hear what you guys are saying, absolutely. The recusal is a term that is being used not in the context of voting, such that there's no reference to vote. This has been taken out. It's just recusal is being used as a way of taking yourself out of something. So in the example that I gave earlier about the RFPs, if someone was to be bid in a system integrator RFP, that person could not be in the process of drafting the RFP for the system integrator. But that person could be part of everything else, the business plan, the RFPs for other vendors, everything. Is at a point in which a person could financially benefit from, its engagement with it, is that this would come. So I'm struggling here to figure out a way to let a person with a material conflict of interest be part of a process where that person could be involved and potentially gain an unfair advantage over others. That will completely dilute the purpose of the code of conduct. So that's what I'm struggling with, Joe. I hear what you're saying, and Kurt. I don't know, is Devin still in the room? Maybe we get someone with better legal brains here to come in.
So,
Maybe.
Commissioners, while this discussion has been going on, I had, and we've got the motion, I think, on the floor and seconded, so this would have to be an amendment. But in that second sentence, what I had done, shall recuse themselves when their further actions present a clear and material conflict as opposed to general knowledge or helpful expertise.
I like that, Governor. As long as it addresses my fellow commissioners' questions, I have no opposition to that proposal.
I think Commissioner Wallace was the second, Flavia was the first. Is that? You want me to read it again? Okay. Any member with a conflict of interest shall recuse themselves when their further actions present a clear and material conflict as opposed to general knowledge or helpful expertise.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that change to the language.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Treasurer.
a couple of things. Does recuse mean that they leave the room, just to be clear?
They have no further involvement in the process. We don't have a room, usually. We usually meet on Zoom, but they're no longer involved in the process. Again, if we're sharing a Google Doc with the RFP questions, that person will no longer have access to that document. Let's put it this way. Is that a good example, Kurt?
Yeah, Kurt, I think there are times when we recuse from further discussion, but we're still in the room, we just sit back. There are times when people leave the room, There are even times when people declare a conflict of interest and recuse themselves but vote in the legislature. So. But I
I'm
think-
not gonna defend those guys.
I think in this particular circumstance, we're really just talking about not participating in the.
Okay, all right, well. I guess, I don't know, you guys have any trouble with them explaining what their conflict is? Yeah, or is there any heartburn on that? Because sometimes people think they have a conflict and they don't. So. But how would we determine it? Would be determined by the chairman in this next one, when it becomes clear, evident, or whatever? Is it clear and evident to what? Somebody in the committee says, hey, no, that's too far. Anybody can object and say, no, you're out of line. I'm just wondering the workings of it. How is it going to work in committee? I think the amendment improves it. I'm going to vote for it, but I'd like to know how it actually works. Who makes that decision when that threshold's crossed?
Well, I think if you follow state law, it is mostly the individual who declares an interest from his perception.
Yeah.
Or her perception.
Yeah.
And I think when you say the member shall disclose, my inclination is to say, that is, I have a conflict of, well, as you did, and, because I have the contractual arrangement with Lisa Spillman.
Yeah.
And I think that's covered in that first paragraph, or first sentence.
Well, let's see how it works.
Okay?
Okay. Question.
Do you want, question's been called, but if you have.
Just one, what I really see in this is that, and I'm fine with the amendment, we really need non-conflicted experts in two phases of this. Number one, the final prep of the RFP, and number two, review of responses to the RFP.
Yeah.
This is what this is really designed to prevent, is someone helping select themselves as the vendor. And I was fine with the initial language. I'm fine with this language. But we really need to, and the onus, a lot of the onus will be on the commission members of these subcommittees to really also identify who they're working with in the subcommittees, and know when it's appropriate and when it's not, as well as the director himself. So I'm fine with the language, and I think it's necessary.
Okay. Any further discussion? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? That motion carries. Congratulations. Now we can actually work on what we need to do. No, we actually, it was seconded, but it was accepted by the seconder.
So from my perspective, we're going to have Commissioner Naves do a victory lap on that one, and go ahead and dive into the RFP process itself. Flavia's done a tremendous job, and I'll let you do the explanation here, but she's really worked to get the RFPs in very good shape. She's created a template, which are in your packets. She's also created about a dozen, I think, different versions of it for roles and vendors we think we need, and has leveraged the existing procurement process and bidding process and the wording therein to the maximal extent possible. So Commissioner Naves, back to you.
Thank you, Anthony. So I want to thank the Treasurer's Office, Norman, and your team, Kurt, was great in helping me think about this. And also Brian Bishop, who is part of our Token Parameter Subcommittee, who helped me draft the initial template of the RFP. Thank you, Brian. I know you're on the line. I appreciate all your help. So the goal of putting this together is obviously, as we are now entering the stage of drafting, creating the token and what that is actually going to look like, because the state in itself is not going to serve as the custodian or the system integrator, provide customer service, and these things. So the state is going to need vendors that are going to do this work for them. In following the RFP process, which different folks were really helpful in, we working on this template that would then be further tailored depending on the features and the responsibilities of each one of these vendors. So as you look at the RFP draft that is in front of you, resemble what you see in other RFPs for state vendors. Very, very similar. Section 6 will be the one that will be further tailored to address specific features of each one of these vendors. We are now we have now identified about 6 different types of vendors that will be required. However, as we start developing the RFP, section 6 of these RFPs, we may need to identify further vendors for this process. And as we develop the specifications, the requirement specifications for each one of them, we may need to tailor down the evaluation methodology as well. Some of them may have, we may need to place greater focus on the technical skills. Some of them we may need to place greater focus in other elements. So depending on how, what it is that vendor would do, we would then adjust the evaluation methodology based on that. But the remainder sections of the RFP should be common to other members of this commission who probably have seen RFPs issued in the past. And the goal here is again to utilize the same document, except for section 6 and 8 for these vendors. And the section 6 will be developed with the help of subject matter experts, part of our subcommittees. We will be looking to start, with the approval of the commission of the draft RFP, we would then start looking to create the different section 6s for each one of these vendors, next week. And hopefully have something that can be put in front of the commission for if any one of the commissions wants to review and approve prior to issuance, with the goal of having these vendors at least in response mode before the end of the year. We don't know whether we will be able to make a selection before the end of the year, but we would like to have these RFPs available for the vendors to respond to before the end of the year, understanding that we're in the middle of October. We have about 4 more weeks before Thanksgiving is before us and 3 weeks before Christmas. So hopefully in this period of time, we're able to have these RFPs out for the public to review and respond.
Thank you, Commissioner. Director Apollo, anything you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing in particular other than let's get it done.
Yeah.
So to the extent that this requires a vote to ratify this as a template going forward, which it may or may not, I've reviewed this, and to the extent that I've been through this and worked with Flavia on it, as well as some of the other kind of customized builds and had discussions around, I'm totally comfortable recommending that we adopt this version and move forward with expediency.
And that really gets to my question. So as I think there's some modifications you're anticipating making to this.
Yes, so 2 kind of specific areas, both section 6, as Commissioner Navas mentioned, where that's going to be really where we define what we're looking for from each respective party. The questions we're going to be asking for smart contract developer are going to be very different than what we're going to be asking an auditor. So that'll need to be section 6. And then she also pointed to the evaluation template, which will be on a section by section basis. We had a discussion regarding whether we can standardize this. And Commissioner Navas, please feel free to put your input in as well. I don't think we could standardize the evaluation criteria, the point system, the rubric. across different vendors. Let me rephrase that, across different proposals, right? So vendors, obviously, we should be looking at as apples to apples within the context of one specific RFP. But the RFP, again, we would give it to an audit company that's been around for 100 years, one of the big four, is gonna have a very different score for, let's say, past work than a blockchain company that's maybe stellar, but it's only been around for 3 years. So there's gonna be some customization there, but as a template, I think, this is where the procurement process would begin anyway, plus those customizations. Again, Commissioner Navas, feel free to add if I missed anything, but that's how I'm looking at this.
No, I think you got it, Anthony. Yeah, it's what I was saying earlier. The methodology will need to be adjusted depending on what it is that type of vendor would deliver to the state. Whereby an auditor, we may more heavily rely on a certain type of expertise, whereby a blockchain, we may rely on a different type of expertise, a system integrator. So the scoring for the methodology would change in there. So this is why we cannot adopt the same one for everyone, because it will not properly assess the vendors per the work that they're going to do. The other part that is important as we proceed in this in a timely fashion is that having a selection of these vendors at the end of the day, whoever we select for each one of the features of the product or the offering, will have an impact on the budget that for this for the commission for the next 2 years. So we would need to identify a range that these vendors will be quoting services for, to make a determination for the commission of the anticipated cost for this project for the next 2 years, to have discussion at the legislature in the beginning of next year.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Treasurer.
Yeah, one of the things you might consider in your evaluation point summary is that I guess the way we do it, you may do it this way, is that we try to get it down to our top 2 or 3 or whatever. And we normally don't do an oral presentation until we get it to that 2 or 3. But if you do an oral presentation, then you say, maybe you say it's worth 10% or 10 points. Then it's almost like you have 2 point things. One before your final cut and your oral, and so you just have to re-weight that and have 2 columns. So whether you do that in some way about in 3.6 about the oil presentation interviews and how it's handled, or you do it in 5 on your point summary, I guess I'd suggest that it's all up to you whether you even need one, but if you do have one, you just have to re-weight it.
No, thank you, Kurt. We are considering whether we would conduct oral presentations. We left that as an option, and we'll be considering, depending on obviously the type of service that we're securing from that vendor, but I appreciate the feedback.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great highlight, Commissioner Miller. This is where, for an interview, again, talking to a big 4 firm is going to be a pitch deck and a bit of a presentation. But speaking to technology teams, this is where we would carve out an hour of our day to actually look at the platform working, or do a code review and really dig into some of the guts of how the code is written. So, I think that to your point is well taken. That's where I think these weights may change per section based on which vendors we're talking to for a particular role.
Thanks. So we're approving as to form pretty much here today. And is the anticipation that the further refined RFP would then come back for further
Thank you,
review?
Mr. Chairman. I think we should have at least a couple pairs of eyes on all of these. Again, because there's gonna be different expertise within the commission for each one, as well as having the AG's office and procurement review them. ETS will need to look at some of these. So there's gonna be some rounds of internal reviews too, which is why we wanna make sure we get the templates kind of square and then kind of disseminate from there.
Ms. Treasurer.
I guess one of the things that I'd like to see is we're going to have two custodians, I guess, one for the tokens and one for the bonds slash cash. That's what I'm assuming. And, you know, we've got two custodians that we work with now in the treasurer's office, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo. I'd like to see us determine, you know, what custodians are going to work with this as soon as possible, so we don't get down the road and find out that there's this federal interference with our business plan. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So just to put a little bit of a point on it, this is as to form. There'll be further refinements made on a, what is a bit unclear to me, are we doing an RFP for each vendor? Or are we doing our RFPs for certain select services? And if so, because I guess if we end up with 6 different vendors that have 6 different RFPs, it makes it very difficult to understand what we've got.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It'd be more of the latter, where we're looking at the different, this would almost be analogous to the working groups, which is why I also think it's important to kind of restructure the subcommittees in that capacity. We would be looking at, in my opinion, a RFP per working group topic,
Okay,
right? So smart contract development, custodial wallets, those would be an RFP for any given topic. There may be anywhere from a handful to a dozen particular vendors under each of those different groups.
perfect. Thank you. Further questions? Commissioner Revelle.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, and this is not my area of expertise, but just a question on that last point. Is there a risk that we aren't taking into account compatibility across vendors and sort of having a higher level integration viewpoint on this? And I guess I just wouldn't want the RFP, I wouldn't want us to be deciding the template of the RFPs with too much detail at this point and not allow for those concepts of kind of vendor to vendor compatibility and who is the custodian and how does that integrate into the other services that are required.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Revelle. I think it's important for us to be as detailed as possible. So maybe a slight disagreement with you there. I think what will end up happening is the Stable Token Commission will need to be the ultimate arbiters of how we put the puzzle pieces together. Because what we're going to find out, to your point, there will be compatibility issues between some of the vendors that we're talking to, should we pursue, in a particular direction. But we're also going to find out that certain vendors probably could do more than we think they can, and that might obviate the need for some other people we're talking to be part of the process. So in my experience doing a project very similar to in the past, it becomes kind of a pastiche of different vendors who you kind of need to get to play together nicely. And having all the details of which chains they're on, which wallets they use, which node infrastructure, we go down the rabbit hole, but understanding that and including those topics as part of the RFP process as questions is going to elucidate that for us beforehand, I would hope.
Okay, Commissioner Navis.
Yeah, thank you. Just adding to what Anthony already said, Joel. So the goal, one of the questions that we're thinking about is exactly what Anthony said, is please explain to us any limitations that you have in system compatibility, with integration with third parties, explain to us all these details. This is why we need, again, the subject matter expertise of these working groups to ask these questions, which I wouldn't know what to ask, right? But they're going to need to do that. And the answers would elucidate for us, okay, this vendor may not be compatible with the rest of the system because there's, their services or features have too much limitations, and we wouldn't be able to connect them through the whole process. So this is going to be part of the questions. This is in section 6, not necessarily the rest of the RFP, but this is where that question would absolutely come in, because we need all these folks to play together really well. Otherwise it will break, right? And this is also part of the beta process that we envision, is when we're going to connect all of them and run the first token. if something in there is not connected the right way, it's going to break, and we're going to figure out what that is and fix it. But we will be looking for those system, integration functionalities and, limitations or anything like that as part of questions in section 6.
Thank you, Commissioner Navis. So just coming back to this, this is more or less the template. It is the template. There will be RFPs that will be issued. Is it your anticipation that we would see what that RFP looks like before it goes out?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Very good. Well, if there isn't anything more on this topic, is the template adequate? And if it is, I would entertain a motion to accept the template as to form for an RFP.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Pope. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, we have that. That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to, just keeping an eye on the clock here, we've got about 15 minutes more scheduled. So I'm going to just expeditiously turn things over to Commissioner Reville, bring us to an update on the business plan with V3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be fairly quick. There have been just a few minor modifications to the business plan, many of which were minor edits, which I don't need to take up the time of the commission to go through all of them, but I did want to point to just a few edits that I think are meaningful. The first is on page 2 at the bottom of the summary of the opportunities section. We added some language that speaks to the point that as an entity designed to serve the public, the state of Wyoming may be better aligned to issue and manage a fiat-backed stable token versus an entity designed with the sole purpose of profit. If you move forward to page 5 and 6, we've added 3 new charts in here, exhibits, which are, I think, quite interesting. Exhibit 1 is the market capitalization of crypto, and as you see, stable tokens comprise a fairly small percentage of the overall crypto market cap at around 10%. But what is very interesting to note here is that the importance of the application within blockchain technology is more around the transaction volume or the velocity of stable tokens, where they are gaining significant share of transaction volume. And then the exhibit 3 was also added, which I think is also a very telling chart around volume, and it's comparing the volume of stable tokens versus existing financial systems or payment systems. One more important addition, I think, is on page 8 under market challenges and risks, number 5. And this goes to some of the concerns that have been raised, public commentary through the community bankers in Wyoming, and Commissioner Wallace has also made comments around this, but recognizing the importance of the success here of having banks and payment service providers on board and part of the process. And then I think one important point here to maybe address as we look forward is on page 12 under high-level architecture, last sentence of the 3rd paragraph there, where we discuss that the native issuance will be done on an initial blockchain, with other blockchains being considered as the adoption of the stable token widens. So this is kind of bringing us to a point in at least the drafting of the business plan where it, I think, becomes necessary for the executive director and the commission to decide upon which is going to be the initial blockchain. And I think the business plan kind of stalls there until we have that. Again, the financial projections and implementation timeline remain blank at this time, so we haven't made any assumptions there. And I just might ask if I could, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Naves or Director Apollo, if they wanted to add any comments to the update of the business plan.
None on my end. Thank you.
Yes, please, Commissioner.
No, none on my end, Governor. Thank you. Joe provided a very comprehensive summary of the changes. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Treasurer.
One of the things that I'd like to get an answer to this question here, and that's essentially in 8, on page 8 and 5, and they're talking about, you're saying a significant shift from bank deposits into stable tokens. My question would be is, if a stable token were, deposited at a community bank, could they be deposited for the purposes of, for lending purposes? So they essentially would make it, you had $1,000 in stable tokens deposited in a community bank and $1,000 of good old US dollars. Would they act the same way for a community bank in lending, allowing them to utilize those just as a standard deposit?
Commissioner Revelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for your question. In practice, the answer is yes. As the current federal regulatory regime sits, the answer is most likely no, as the community banks, whether a bank is state regulated or federally regulated, are still subject to oversight from federal regulators, whether the Fed or the OCC, and it's been made clear by those regulators at this time that they do not want their member banks dealing in crypto. And I suspect that the Wyoming stable token would be deemed as crypto in their definition. So I think that would be the challenge currently for the banks. But in practical reality, yes, that would be possible and should be possible.
Yeah, and then I've got Commissioner Pope.
So I guess if it could be and should be, I guess my question is, what language do we need to, suggest that would allow that in the federal legislation somewhere along the lines as state-operated stable tokens, backed 100% by U.S. Treasuries may be assumed in the same light for deposit as treasuries or bills. So I guess that's what type of language I would assume that we would have to entertain. But I think it's I think that's maybe a road that we want to try to travel down. But I guess I can bring that up for a short discussion because we're running out of time. We can look at it later, maybe.
Thanks. Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not 100% sure that the process would, even in theory, be as easy as just lending it out, because rehypothecation of a digital asset, since you can't create digital assets like you can, like a bank can dollars, a bank can essentially create money through the lending process, whereas there is going to be a stable number of stable tokens that would have to be generated in order to do the same thing. So I think in practice, lending the stable tokens would be much more difficult than the thought of just saying that Anthony can borrow my stable tokens because he can't pay me back in additional stable tokens with interest unless he goes out and buys more stable tokens. So I'm thinking that this is an issue that even given the regulatory hurdles, would be very difficult for a bank to initiate.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Pope. I don't think it would be that hard. I think we need to take the lens off of traditional banking and look at what's happening in liquidity pools on decentralized exchanges like Uniswap and others, where it's fairly trivial to just put some stable tokens into a liquidity pool and start generating yield off of the other assets that are potentially in there. And again, I don't want to open that can of worms given kind of we're on the clock, but I do, if we're going to go down this path, which I think is a good one to go down and one we need to go down, I want to look at it very broadly within the context of the way traditional banking works, but also how these digital assets may be used in the future.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Oh, yeah, Commissioner Revelle, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Pope, I just wanted to very quickly address your concern, which is a good one, but to maybe delineate between borrowing and lending on a fully reserved basis and borrowing and lending on a fractionally reserved basis. And I think the concerns that you're raising are on fractional reserve banking, which in fact would cause some concerns and would involve a deeper discussion. On a fully reserved basis, I would concur with Director Apollo that it happens today, and it would not be that difficult, I don't think, with the proper oversight and regulatory approvals. I don't think it would be that hard to execute for the banks.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you. I do want to revert back to Commissioner Reville's earlier point regarding the selection of a blockchain. We want to still endeavor to issue at least a test token by the end of this year, and I do think that's possible. However, that's going to require us to make a decision, potentially now, on where we actually choose to launch that. For context, I've had no shortage of incredible conversations with terrific tech providers who are building across myriad ecosystems. But I think at this point, we probably should pick one to start with, begin our build in that direction, hit our marks for the end of the year, and then discuss what it looks like to start onboarding subsequent chains early next year, potentially through the RFP process.
Very good. Mr. Apollo, do you have, I guess, two questions. One is if you select a chain now, but you can onboard it onto other chains later, you're not selecting your destiny necessarily. You can move.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And there are several instances of one chain being compatible with others, a process called transpiling. You could take code from one and put it on another, and some of them are just compatible out of the box.
So, and I presume you probably have a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, you'd be correct. I think we should be launching my personal recommendation, and this will be, I will disclose I've built predominantly in the Ethereum ecosystem, but I do think Ethereum is the right choice. The number of daily active wallets on the platform is by far the largest. It is the most compatible. It opens up, being what's called EVM compatibility with the Ethereum virtual machine would give you compatibility with several other more scalable, more efficient, more cost-efficient and speedier blockchains, which we refer to as layer 2s. Those include Polygon, Avalanche, Arbitrum, Optimism. Again, the list goes on. And then there are other blockchains, like Cardano, like Tezos, which are all pursuing Ethereum compatibility as well. So everything, although there are merits to those other systems, everything is going in one direction in my perspective. That being said, I think there are a very large number of other chains that are up and coming that have privacy technology that we should be looking into pretty substantially for the way that individuals can use a Wyoming stable token and not have to worry about the purview of whomever reviewing all their transactions. Commissioner Meyer, I'm going to steal a line from you from up in Casper the other day. Shouldn't matter if you're buying bubble gum or bullets. No one should know what you as a private citizen are purchasing. And I think that there are, again, multiple chains to do that on, but the bulk of users, the bulk of development, and the most stress testing of any given ecosystem has happened on Ethereum.
Okay. Any opinions from the members of the commission?
Chairman?
Mr.
I guess I would
Commissioner Wallace.
just like to make a comment that not being fully into this field and that sort of thing, I don't know as though I would have the qualifications to decide what blockchain is better than any other. And I don't know as though I'd feel comfortable voting for one without, at least being presented some kind of documentation and an opportunity to review those. So I would be very uncomfortable just voting to approve a particular blockchain without a little bit further research on my end.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Commissioner Revelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just as a general concept, perhaps to discuss as a commission, is whether or not this initial discussion should itself be an RFP process. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but I just wanted to present it as a possible discussion topic.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Commissioner Pope?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Apollo, is there any way to get an RFP from a particular decentralized blockchain? I'm assuming that would be difficult. But my next question would be then, what are the avenues of us being able to get the research that Commissioner Wallace mentioned?
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Commissioner Pope. I don't think personally that trying to RFP particular chains would be a prudent effort. You would be RFPing a team that's building on top of that, right? And if that's the way the commission would like to go, so be it, right? And then we could get some good information from those people. They would know the intricacies of any given system better than probably any of us would. But that being said, one of the things with a little bit more time, I probably would have came to the table with, because I didn't give you enough paper already, as you can see, would be kind of a comparison of all these different chains, right? There's no one particular metric by which you should judge a blockchain as the best, right? There's transaction throughput, there's gas fees, there's security considerations, there's node infrastructure, there's decentralization, there's whether the SEC considers its native platform token a security or not. There's no shortage of inputs here, and I'm happy to prepare that. And if I think, Commissioner Wallace, if that's something that you think we can perhaps include in the report that's due November 1st, that's something I could certainly have by then.
Makes sense. Commissioner Navis.
Thank you, Governor. Yeah, I was saying it's pretty much what actually David said and Anthony reinforced. Some of these chains are decentralized. Ethereum, for example, there's no place that we can send this RFP to. Like, no one will pick up an answer. It's completely decentralized. So whereby there are other chains that have managing teams that you can send this to, right? So it will be challenging to start this process with an RFP. Obviously, Jeff, to your point, which is very well taken, the analysis of further chains that do have managing teams will be subject to extensive review and to some of the points that Anthony made, security, gas fees and everything else. And that's what we're proposing, that we review that extensively for the next chains that will be coming down the road. But for Ethereum in particular, because it's a completely decentralized blockchain, starting with an RFP process with something like this would prove challenging. So the test here, and as the governor said, that can be changed. The test is just to start with it because it's the one that affords the most malleable to work with different things, that would adapt more to different types of vendors, and we could then change depending on how this progresses.
Okay, Director.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. To echo Flavia's point and maybe just add a little bit more, one of the discussions I had with Commissioner Naves was if we're able to do this, we'll call it a proof of concept by the end of the year on a platform like Ethereum, at that point, there's nothing precluding us from taking the technical schematics and putting that into an RFP for other chains, right? To say we need, forget KYC AML, forget the reserves process. For you as a technical provider, we need you to be able to, your chain, to be able to issue a token, get it to a reseller. That reseller gets to institutional, gets to retail. Privacy is here, privacy is not there. We're within, OFAC controls. And if they can show us that, then, as Commissioner Meyer mentioned earlier before, they can show us that as part of the interview process of an RFP, that would go a long way to getting us comfortable with what they have. Because we're going to see at that point, not only what their tech can do, but also the adjacent infrastructure around any given chain, particularly some of these new up-and-comers.
Commissioner Pope.
Slightly going in a little bit of a different direction with this. My thoughts are that I can see, I'm familiar with the major blockchains. I can look at a whole bunch of different information side by side, and for me, I'm still very probably going to go with the recommendation of the director, mainly because we have tasked him to make this work, and I would, absent other extenuating circumstances, I would end up looking at all the information and going with what Director Apollo recommends anyway. So I'm able to make a decision today if something were, if a decision were to be required.
Okay. Director, it does feel to me a little, I don't know if premature is really the word, but it does feel to me that it might be good to have 2 or 3 concepts to really talk about, since this is the backbone, essentially, of what this stable token is going to be. I tend to agree with Commissioner Pope that probably that's the best to go to, but I guess with respect and deference to Commissioner Wallace's point of view, I did want to know what the delay you perceive could be if we could make this a decision at our next meeting and make it sort of the premier event for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if we postpone the decision till our discussion on the 14th, we're going to have, as Commissioner Naves pointed out earlier, we're going to run right into Thanksgiving and then right into the holidays. Even with 2 more weeks of lead time, I think that would make a material difference. So my suggestion would be we do some kind of motion special meeting around the time that the report is due to the select committee towards the end of this month, which is, again, not too far away. Or perhaps that research is encapsulated in the report. Everyone has a chance to digest it, and then shortly thereafter, we can again convene to make this particular decision.
Okay, but that latter suggestion might be the right one. So, Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, As you know, I've been looking at this for a couple of years, and I think Ethereum is the clear favorite in this horse race. And what really kind of sets it apart is just the sheer volume of coin out there and the implementation that can occur. It does have a couple of, weak points that were there a couple of years ago. I think those things have been addressed. The other coins that are out there necessarily just don't have the bandwidth or the adoption within that and within this universe. So I think that the sooner we can, that's fine. I think it won't take much time at all for the director to put together all the facts that need to be present and ranking the different the top 3 or 4 whatever coins out there that even have a chance. And I think that Ethereum has basically the right plugs to plug into all of the other stable level 2 coins that are in the process. And the one thing that really makes it is that the brokers and stuff like Kraken have they don't have to do much of anything just to onboard our stable token onto their systems. And so where some of these coins that might have slicker, better features, but they don't have the adoption, which this is a coin I think that'll serve us well now, well into the future. It gives us the flexibility to add more coins in the future. So if you want to delay it to the first of the month, I guess, then we delay it to then. But I think the decision's inevitable.
Okay, further comments? Mr. Apollo, I think you've done a phenomenal job. Your chair, however, let you down. We're 8 minutes after noon.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my watch is apparently 4 minutes fast, so that's a benefit for me. With your permission, we could just super expeditiously go through the last bullet. It'll take 30 seconds.
Sure.
So you have it. But I want to get this in front of the commission because, again, the November 1st report is a very large deliverable, the largest deliverable I'm going to have so far. Really, I'll put together an outline of how I expect this to go, an executive summary, the one-pager, the high-level details of what we've accomplished, then breaking down a little bit more specifically what we've accomplished, who's been onboarded, how the subcommittees are operating, and how our online presence is getting out there. Update them on all the financials as we've discussed, as well as incorporate the maybe anticipated budget that we'll have going into the appropriations. We'll talk a little bit more about token design, echoing what we've just discussed here. The legal side of things will incorporate my memo regarding the Wyoming stable token status as a security. And then one other thing I do want to highlight here is that myself and Commissioner Naves, and likely some others I'll tag in along the way, will look at the existing legislation in case we think that there are statutory changes that need to be made that will make a few tweaks here and there that may permit us to have much more functionality in the future. Finally, to give them a formal roadmap of what we expect to deliver and by when, and we'll launch this whole thing by the end of next year.
Fantastic, thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, I know we have public comment, so
Mr. Chairman, that is all from my side, and I thank you for the opportunity.
thank you. If there are members of the audience or anyone online that would like to address the commission, now is a good time. Mr. Meyer. And then we'll.
If you wish to make public comment, please state your name.
Are we good now?
Yep.
Members of the commission, Scott Meyer with the Wyoming Bankers Association. I'm going to make a comment here, but I guess I want to preface it by saying that one of the members of your commission has forgotten more about banking than I'll ever learn. So I say that with all deference.
to Commissioner Wallace. I want to address the question that came up from Commissioner Treasurer Meyer that talks about whether there's, the possibility of lending. And I think that what I want to comment on is there certainly is a difference between whether you're going to use a stable token as collateral for a loan versus lending the token. And I believe that that's what Commissioner Meyer was talking about. Can you use that as collateral? And with all deference to our other commissioners that made comments about this, and I'm going to parcel some words just a little bit because I think there's a difference out here. I don't think from a practical standpoint it is viable. Maybe from a theoretical standpoint it should be viable, but not from a practical standpoint. And the reason I say that is if you look at and I have not read your business plan 3.0 since I just found it this morning. But if you look at the other versions, and I believe it's still the same, the question has always been proposed is what to do or how do you turn in these tokens? And the question that originally came out a few months ago was how do you deal with when we want to cash in a token? And when you do that, is it dollar for dollar? Well, not so sure because we don't know. I think the answer at one point was, well, we anticipate receiving T-bills in as fast as we're cashing them out, pretty much kind of at an equal basis. But I think we've all heard of SVB and Signature Bank. So that doesn't work. So in later versions of the business plan, it talks about, well, we will redeem those tokens, but if there's not enough money in those tokens or in the accounts, then you're going to get a proportionate share of what is in there because we have to take into account expenses and other things that are going on with respect to holding those funds. That puts a bank in a very difficult position because if you're going to say you have a $1,000 stable token and I want to borrow $1,000, they don't know if they're going to get $1,000 back. So then the question is, are they going to discount that and how far would they discount that? So I think from a very practical standpoint, I don't believe any of your Wyoming community banks would ever take any of the stable tokens as collateral for a loan because they're just too uncertain as to what's going to happen. With that comment, Mr. Chairman, I would certainly stand for any questions.
Are there questions? Questions, Mr. Treasurer?
I think a comment on how I see the practical aspect of it working is that if we got the cash in for a stable token and we could probably set up a offsetting deposit of actual cash into the bank, and you'd end up with our cash and the stable token. So you'd actually get two deposits for one that would be, cash from the treasurers that we got from the stable tokens deposited in your bank, plus the stable token, which, you could only lend the stable token out, if we were gonna, you probably couldn't use, I don't know whether you could use fractional lending on that or not, but I know that you could from our cash. And then that would, I think, cross the concerns that your community banks would have as far as being able to use that. And essentially we've got, $250, $300 million in the TDOA program now. So, that's something that would necessarily, we could maybe work some kind of a cross collateralization out in those areas, but I think that's something that we could do. We're not going to jump in there and buy a whole bunch of treasury notes or even 90-day bills or 30-day bills. There's going to be a huge amount of that in cash, just for the very reasons and the very concerns that you and the banking community has. So in looking at the implementation, I think that's the way that we're going to do it. We're going to get a return on that cash, and that return is going to give us we hope, both the operating aspect of it and also the reserves that we need to build. So it's like you're going to actually end up, if you take a deposit in tokens, I see it actually in the implementation of it, the guarantee or concerns, we're going to have to probably just put the cash that we got for it in there and not take the yield off of our treasury, but take a yield that the community banks are willing to give us. So that's not set in stone, but I'm saying that's the way I envision it working to make sure that you guys are protected, we're protected, and that makes sense to me. And, you know, it's like I say, these guys got to tell us what the rules are going to be, the commission does. But from my perspective, I think that would work for you and work for us.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I think the only other comment, and I think Commissioner Revelle made the point, you know, there's a lot of federal regulations out there regarding what we can and can't do with digital assets, whether it's cryptocurrency or stable token. I respectfully disagree that it's only with the current administration. When you see what's happening right now in the Gaza, and you see what's happening with Israel, and you're finding out now that a lot of the funding that's going on with some of this stuff, like Hamas, whatever, is going through cryptocurrency, I can almost bet you that nothing will happen with regarding cryptocurrency in the banking world, at least in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Please come on up.
Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Troy Carruthers, Advisor to American Crypto Fed. In light of, I have both a request and a question. And this is in light of the recent draft of the business plan being made available sincerely just a few hours before this meeting. The request would be that for greater transparency going forward and time for public review, I would ask the commission to consider posting future drafts with ample lead time for public review before commission meetings. That is the request. The question would be, in drafting this most recent business plan, were the public comments that have been previously submitted, were those taken into consideration? Thank you.
Yeah. And yes, all of our comments are taken into consideration. They are, however, not binding for what this commission does. And so appreciate the comments.
I have a question. This is Xiaomeng Zhou, one of the organizers of American Crypto Fed. I have a question. Will the commission still consider to apply a bank charter like a regulatory wrapper? Is that still in place?
Mr. Apollo, I'm not sure that is, but if you have any wisdom on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, that is not currently defined in the plan. And Commissioner Revelle, if you have a different understanding than that, please let me know. But to my knowledge, it's not necessarily defined at this point in time.
Thank you, Chairman. So we can assume this commission will not become a bank. So because this commission will not apply for bank charter. Is that conclusion now correct?
Well, you're going to test me. I cannot imagine us becoming a bank for several reasons. One is we don't have a state bank. We wouldn't want to become a state bank. We have a very vital and vibrant community banking sector. There are obviously other banks that are there. So I don't believe this commission has actually taken that topic up, but I would think there would be several hurdles, both legal and practical.
Thank you, Chairman. So then I have a question about RFP. So if community banks in Wyoming apply for implement the Wyoming stable tokens, can the commission waive the RFP process for them? Because the community banks are already heavily regulated. And if they participating in Wyoming stable token and they issue Wyoming stable token on behalf of the commission can provide them some requirement. But I think if somehow the RFP process can be waived, that can create more flexibility for the community bank to join this program.
I don't believe, Mr. Kenny, there are statutory requirements for us to issue either in-state, out-of-state, community bank, small company. There are some other provisions. Mr. Kenny, can you speak to that?
Just a very little bit. I mean, we could certainly look more into it, but yes, I do believe there are. I mean, I don't. My understanding, and this is just what I've heard, is that the state of North Dakota may have a state chartered, another state chartered bank, but may actually
North
have
Dakota does
its
have
own
a state bank. They also were the only state to have a communist administration at one time, so.
So I
Yeah.
do believe that it is legally possible to create a regime where a state has a bank because they have one. We certainly don't have that right now. A lot of statutory changes would need to be made in order for that to happen, but.
Okay. Mr. Treasurer.
I think we have contemplated, approved sellers, but not approved issuers, that the state will be the only issuer and the only entity that issues and burns tokens. But approved sellers, I think, is something that, and licensed, I think we've been contemplating that. But, we are in a very, very early stage of this process, and so, but having a whole lot of issuers out there to where we have to keep track of all the different issuers, and we don't know where they're getting the money and where they're taking it in, what their KYCs and AMLs are, but yet we have to be responsible for all that as a licensed issuer. Then that puts us into a much more complex compliance arena. So from my perspective, I don't think we're going to have multiple issuers. That may change. That's just my opinion and opinions that I've heard. But from what I understand is that the state will be the issuer and the burner, but that they're most likely than not, we're not going to be the only person that has access to distribution of the tokens or selling the tokens or however that process may occur. Has yet to be defined, so.
Yes.
Community banks have to comply with all the KYC, AML, everything. Okay, that's regulatory wrapper discussed in the business draft 1.0. So if they participated in, they have to comply with all of this. The commission just needs to write one sentence or few sentences. I have to comply with this. And the money they come in, they can send to treasurer office that designated account. So they have all those flow, they have organization, the administration, they can manage this pretty well, I believe. We can try to discuss with several community bank and to see how that works, because the larger merchant will pick up some banks and try to use Wyoming stable tokens. And I defer that to Troy. Troy, can you discuss that? Will we discuss that?
And I thank you. I think there's a point you've made before, and we really appreciate it because it is true, but we're a little bit ahead of ourselves on that. But please, Troy.
Yeah, so for additional clarification there, the idea being that obviously, the commission wants this, wants the whole idea of the WST for the benefit of the state of Wyoming, right? And for all of the citizens of the state of Wyoming. And built in within that are the community banks. So, to me, one of the keys here is to make sure that the community banks are involved in this process, involved in it from the issuing standpoint as well as redemption, and allowing that to happen. And the merchants who are actually affiliated or working with those community banks today are going to be more open to accepting, right, that token or any of the stable tokens going forward, right? They'll be more open to accepting those if they are working with the local banks that they're working with today.
That is a good point. So, thank you.
I'll
Commissioner
just
Wallace.
make a comment as a banker that I certainly think maybe someday that something like that could be possible, but I think that's a ways down the road, but quite a ways at this point. And we would have to convince our regulators that it's okay as well.
So, thank you. Very good. Thank you for being here as well. Appreciate your input all along the way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good. Further comments, please.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, very good to meet you. Thank you for your time. By way of introduction, my name is Nikhil Joshi, and I'm joined by my colleague Shunsuke Murasaki. I'm Chief Operating Officer, and Murasaki is Chief of Staff of a company called Emergo. We were made aware of the State of Wyoming stablecoin initiative by our friends and colleagues at IOG, including Charles Hoskinson. Emergo is part of the Cardano blockchain ecosystem. Our business comprises education, fintech, and media products. We invest in companies, and we also work with organizations looking to augment their existing product or marketing strategy by incorporating a blockchain or indeed cryptocurrency component. Our CEO and founder, Ken Kodama, is from Japan, and Emergo's roots are there. Ken is very well connected to blockchain companies, traditional finance companies, and other players, including those with their own stable tokens in Japan. Our regional expertise is very much anchored in Asia and Africa. And we have employees in Singapore, where we're headquartered, with footprint in India, Southeast Asia, Africa, Europe, and the US. Murasaki and I arrived yesterday from Singapore and Tokyo specifically to attend this meeting today. We're here to convey a few points, really. The Wyoming Stable Token Initiative has piqued our interest significantly, and our attention is drawn to the state of Wyoming being so front-footed on this initiative. As you can imagine from us looking outside in to the US, it's extremely positive in its ambition to create a framework and identify practical use cases to foster its adoption. Secondly, we see a number of parallels between the Commission's areas of interest and certain developments in Asia, and I'll touch on those in a second. And thirdly, we'd simply like to offer our assistance to the Commission in helping to shape thinking around this initiative. Examples of this might be our familiarity with the Asian landscape and its jurisdictional differences, familiarity with use cases that leverage blockchain technology to build on existing economic activities in that region, and thirdly, access to partners in Asia that may help the state of Wyoming's trade and economic activity. There's a trade corridor between our side of the world and here, and we're very keen to help you explore how to use the technology to bolster that trade corridor. Just as a high-level comment, the regulatory landscape in Asia is, obviously it comprises a number of jurisdictions. So there's a spread on the regulatory apathy or indeed appetite, right, to be involved in this space. But on balance, the region has a number of countries where governmental and regulator awareness and appetite is increasing at a reasonable rate. Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, and Thailand are immediate examples that come to mind. Just in terms of adoption, I'm going to quote a rather recent report from Chainalysis, which flags that Asian countries make up 9 out of the top 20 for global crypto adoption in 2023. India is in top place on that report. India, Vietnam, and the Philippines are 3 out of the top 6. So just as a high-level headline comment, I suppose, right, just around adoption, I just wanted to flag that point. Use cases for blockchain in Asia are several-fold. Finance is a clear outlier. Payments, remittances, and credit lending, especially to those who are currently unbanked, is a significant use case. That, of course, lends itself to a stable token for things like credit, where those don't have access to it, digital inclusion, again, for the same reason that things like documentation to prove who you are, identification, or access to a bank as a consequence of that is limited in many jurisdictions. Of course, this all leads to increased purchasing power and consumer spending, as well as growth in e-commerce. Supply chain, of course, much of Asia's economy is driven by agriculture and commodities, which make up complex and diverse supply chains. Blockchain can provide better transparency and traceability, improve authenticity in this case. And we then also have healthcare and government. So healthcare blockchain allows secure storage and access of sharing of patient data, empowers patients to maintain control over sensitive health information, privacy, that kind of thing. And then indeed with the government, as you can imagine, with that particular region, there's a bit of a spread on how much, how capable your own government is. And so here the blockchain technology allows improved government services, transparency, indeed putting voting on chain. In the interest of time, I won't go into a lot of detail around specific country examples. However, Musaki is just going to give you a bit more meat on the bone and talk about Japan specifically.
Thank you very much. As introduced by Nikhil, my name is Shinsuke Murasaki, and I'm from Tokyo, Japan. So when I heard about this initiative from Charles Hoskinson, we immediately at the company discussed how we can contribute to this initiative. And speaking of Japan, where I'm from, Japanese government amended a Payment Service Act in 2023, June. So this year, so that they put new framework for stable token. Since then, there's various players are building stable token for a number of problems, including improving efficiency in the business sector. So I think as a company and as an individual working for Imago, I have quite good insight about what's happening in stable token in Japan, as well as connection to players, and also the traditional players that want to embark on this stable token initiative. Also, legal people and legal firm that actually help Japanese government to amend that specific Payment Service Act. So as this Wyoming stable token initiative evolve and probably go for much outside of the US and try to go beyond United States, then try to acquire the partners in Japan or broader Asia, we believe we can provide our expertise in Asia. So lastly, we believe this Wyoming initiative is very forward thinking, and we would like to contribute as much as possible, leveraging our expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Questions?
I guess if you could have any material that you could forward to our director that we could, review at our time when we have more time. Thank you.
Yes, sir. No problem. Absolutely more than happy to do so.
Thank you again, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further comment? I don't believe we have any, so Treasurer Meyer, would you make a motion to adjourn?
I will second that.
Has been moved. Sure, please, go ahead. Yeah, actually, you have to press that button. There you are.
Okay, just making sure everybody on the commission knows me. I moved to Wyoming almost 2 years ago. Just want to make sure, especially Commissioner Wallace, any education, any examples of what other companies are doing, I would love to be a resource. It sounds like I cannot be on any of your subcommittees, maybe, because I do represent my consortium, which are solution and technology providers. So I just want everyone to be aware. I want to make sure I can be a part of what you guys are putting together. Know that you can call me anytime. I'm right here in Cheyenne. So just want to make everyone aware and
And
full
thank you.
disclosure.
And it's certainly not our intent to exclude you by any means. But if, at the point that one of your clients becomes the vendor or something like that, that could be an issue. But otherwise, I think we have tried to sort of cobble that language around to encourage participation.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't really like the word vendor because I think your solution is not going to be a vendor. It's going to be many, many solutions, and I'm trying to lay the groundwork for years to come,
sure.
not for just one stable code, token launch. So keep that in mind, that we can be working with the community banks, with the corporations, the banks all around Wyoming to help them understand that they will benefit from this. And I am free for their services.
And I appreciate that. We're
you.
bound by the language of our accounting program,
Exactly.
which refers to people as vendors. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.